of the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners, please rise and join with me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to make note of the fact that immediately prior to this meeting, we had an executive session of all 7 commissioners, at which time we discussed personnel matters. And I would also like to note that with regard, I know a lot of people are here for the discussion on the Willows Mansion alternative use, and the board will not be voting on that tonight. It will be a fact-finding session to hear from the neighborhood, from the school as well. And so if you're worried about us passing anything tonight, that's not going to happen.
So, Jim, point of order, though, on that. My understanding is that you're going to ask for direction from us, so there is going to be a vote. So I don't think that's, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I don't think that's an accurate characterization.
There's not going to be an up or down vote on the proposal by the applicant. That's what I meant. Okay.
Are we directing them though to negotiate the lease
Well,
and get
we'll get
more
there.
subsidies?
We,
Okay.
we aren't there yet.
It's my understanding that there will be an action item on that.
Also, if you're here to speak on, we have an agenda whereby the public is allowed to speak relatively early. And if you're here to speak on the Willows matter, we would ask that you not speak during public participation, but that you wait until the matter comes up as a discrete item, which would be under Parks and Recreation. The exception to that is if you can't stay. If you can't stay through that 1/3 of the agenda when we get there, then come up and say what you want on the Willows. Okay. Let us go now to item number 1, which is the report of the Skunk Hollow Garden Group. Sarah Pilling, this is the year-end report for 2015.
Yes. Good evening. I'm Sarah Pilling. I'm the garden coordinator, along with Katrina Ogilvy, for the Skunk Hollow Community Garden. So I just want to, you've read the report, I know it's in your packet, but for the public who are here and the public at home, because there is an important announcement at the end of it, I'd like to give a brief summary of it. So first off is to thank the commissioners for their continuing relationship with us, who uses about 1.25 acres at Skunk Hollow. 2015 was a very interesting year. We had 60 families gardening with us. That's more than ever before. And it was a very interesting year weather-wise. We had school groups once again come to the garden. They consisted of the little girls from Agnes Irwin who love to dig up worms more than they like to plant beans. Haverford School came twice. Villanova came. There were 45 Villanova girls on their service day, and Harcum College, some of the faculty came. These do not just come to walk around and look at the garden. They come to work with us. Everything we do in the garden is working with each other. There's no working for. Once again, we collected vegetables to give away. Phil Abundance was analyzing their in gatherings, so we work directly with Loaves and Fishes, which is an extremely large food pantry in Lower Delaware County. And we have a system of gathering, weighing, washing, packaging, and then I go to Mom's Organic Market because our vegetables are organic, at least they're pesticide-free. So this year, to tell you, in 2012, we gave away a value of $400 worth of vegetables. This last year, we gave away a value of $3,854. That's incredible because in addition to us gathering and to give away, we have a survey, and with 50% of the gardeners responding, I wish it was a little higher, 127 people ate regularly. That was every week. And we shared our produce with another 127 families. And we don't count how many are in those families. So the garden is really maturing, and it's fabulous. We have floated the idea with Penn State Cooperative Extension, Delaware County, that their home economists, and they got a grant to do this, they will teach cooking using our vegetables as the reference. Because what we discovered is they didn't know what paste tomatoes were for, and they'd never seen a carrot that had a top on it. So those are two of the things to give you a little bit of idea of what we gave away. These were just the high items. Try 369 pounds of squash, 137 pounds of tomatoes, 130 pints of cherry tomatoes, carrots, and other vegetables. Fiscally, we're in a really good position financially. What we get from our gardeners, which was the fee you set at $50, pretty much covers all our expenses. So 2016, this is the announcement. The garden was full with 66 gardeners, but between people moving, having babies, buying houses, and changing jobs, we have room for 2 more family units to join. So if anybody out there, please get in touch with Katrina Ogilby. It's Katrina with a K, Ogilby, all one word, at gmail.com, or myself, sfpillbox@gmail.com. We have room for 2 more family units. They would get 1.5 beds apiece. So that's what I wanted to tell you, because we normally have a very long waiting list, but we've had a lot of sifting back and forth. So thank you. I'm going to give the original copy to Bob Zinkowski. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I just want to say thank you to the whole group, but mostly to you and to Katrina for spearheading this incredible effort. It has been just such a wonderful, positive contribution to our community, and really filled a little niche that we had it didn't exist before. So.
Well, it's more than that, Elaine. I don't like to speak of myself, but I will. I had to have a knee replaced this fall, and I'm pretty much alone. I have no parents, no siblings, and my kids live out of town. I wouldn't have gotten through the surgery if it hadn't been for people from the garden. They sent cards, they brought food, they spent the night, they drove me places. So as an example of the fact that how we're building a sense of community, which is a whole piece to it that no one really realized was going to happen.
It's really wonderful. So bravo. It's a really nice job.
But with all the generous giving you did, your individual farmers still had ample supplies for themselves.
Oh, absolutely. 127 people ate regularly. That was probably every week. People ate out of the garden. A lot of us became mostly vegetarian because it was just amazing. Despite the drought, the produce we got. And what it means is people are amending their beds constantly with a topsoil compost mix that we buy from Mayfield Gardens. But people are composting in their backyards, and they're hauling bucket after bucket after bucket to the gardens. So the soil is really becoming rich.
You don't use the township's compost supply?
We do, but we amend it. The leaf mold is good to a point, but it doesn't hold water. It drains very quickly.
Okay.
So you need either topsoil or
Okay.
stuff out of your compost pile to make
All
it
right, does
good.
anybody else have a comment?
I just have a quick comment. Sarah, I'll echo Elaine's and Jim's thanks for spearheading this, you and Katrina. And also, I think it's fair to say you put the word community in the community garden, so appreciate that.
That's what it's about.
I know it is. And I will say this, just to add on, and that is that I did read your report. I was enthralled by reading it. I hope you have that someplace other than buried in our meeting packet, because I'll ask anyone who gets a chance to read it to do so. It really reads like something out of time, because it's a wonderful recap of what you did. I think if you had a couple of years of those strung together, it would make an interesting short story.
Well, funny that you'd ask. We are going from a website to a blog. So I will be posting it to our blog. And then
Great.
anyone who wants to, it's Skunk Hollow Garden at wordpress.com.
Perfect. I'm glad that you got a chance to say that. Thanks.
Can you give us your Twitter feed? No?
I'll handle it for you.
We do have a Facebook page.
But thank you, Sarah. That's really a wonderful cause, and I really appreciate it. I think all of our board does. Let's move to item number 2. This is personnel, appointments to various boards and commissions, and we'll turn to Phil R. for that.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to make the following appointments, announces of Sarah Oakes to the Harb Commission, to Rick Leonardi to the Villanova Care Group, and Jane Galley to the Villanova Care Group. And while I say that, I'll also mention that that's the Villanova Communication and Review Group based on the CICD construction project that's underway. And Jim, if you allow, I'll say that our anticipated start date for these meetings will be Thursday, February 18th at 6:30 upstairs on the second floor. And we'll probably have more information about that on the Township website. Thank
Phil,
you.
if that was a motion for appointment, then I will second that.
All right, is there any discussion here? I just would like to mention, I'm really sorry we only have one opening on the Historic and Architectural Review Board, and we have 2 applicants for it, and they're both eminently well qualified, and we almost flipped a coin to come up with our selection, who was Sarah Oakes. Oakes, I'm sorry. So we have a motion and a second, and I don't see anybody in the audience that wants to comment, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and it passes 7-0. All right, let us go to item 3, the Superintendent of Police. This is Resolution 2016-27, Observation of Black History Month by Radnor Township. Chief?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in preparation for the Board of Commissioners meetings, Mr. Zinkowski, the Township Manager, has periodic meetings with the staff to go over the agenda, and I was given the honor of introducing the resolution for the board to vote on. And in lieu of reading this resolution, I wanted to do a little bit of research to find out why Black History Month is important. As you know from reading the resolution, it's actually been around since 1926, but it didn't become official, nationally recognized until 1976. And in our nation's history, it's kind of funny when you realize it's only been nationally recognized for 40 years. But what I did was I did a little Google research because I wanted to find out the top reasons why Black History Month is important. So the 5th reason, and I'll go in succession that way, it actually honors historic leaders of the black community, and not just those who rose to prominence. From our history classes back in grade school, we learned about Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, and it's people like that that most likely would have been obscure if it wasn't for some type of recognition. The 4th reason would be it helps us better to be stewards of the privileges we've gained through history. There's an old saying that you can't be sure where you're going unless you know where you came from, and that's true with our American history. The 3rd reason, it provides an opportunity to highlight the best of black history and culture, which many of us weren't aware of. Personal note, I went to Cleveland last year because I always wanted to visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And when you first start out, you realize that a lot of rock and roll music was inspired by gospel singers and blues singers. And that's something that I never knew. The number 2 reason, it creates an awareness for all people to realize what our history is as a country. And perhaps the most important, the number 1 reason that we have to remember is that black history is actually all of our history as Americans. So that's why I am proud to introduce this resolution to the Board of Commissioners.
Well, I'm very appreciative of the fact that you did that research. It would have been very simple to just give it to us for action, but going back and digging that up is very helpful to all of us. Thank you. All right, is there a motion
I'll
to...
move the approval of Resolution 2016-27.
Is there a second? All right. Is there any discussion up here? Anybody in the audience want to comment on the resolution?
Well, I was just wanted to mention that recently, within the last week or so, the U.S. Postal Service released a stamp honoring Richard Allen, who is the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and who actually preached in Radnor when he was getting started and would stay at a family's house in Bryn Mawr. We have a park that we've named for him, Richard Allen Park. It's a little pocket park. And we have quite a history of positive contributions by black people in our township.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And that passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, we are now going to have a very pleasant item to look at. and that is a video tribute to our own Emlyn Tunnell, who was raised here in Radnor and went on to fame and stardom in the National Football League. Tammy?
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity here and very proud to introduce this video on Emlyn Tunnell. It traces some highlights of his life. He's a remarkable man, of which Radnor Township, specifically Garrett Hill, can be very proud to call their own. There's a very remarkable video that's been put together by a man by the name of Jim Vankowski. He's actually he's the man who's behind the Delaware County Sports Museum that's represented here throughout the Township building. His leadership, of course, led to his relationship here with Brad Now, who's with us tonight. He is the senior executive producer on behalf of Comcast Sportsnet. He actually prepared the video in cooperation, of course, with Jim. It's amazing some of the things about Emlyn Tunnell, of course, being the first African-American to play for the New York Giants, and then having the highest distinction to be inducted into the Pro Sports Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and being the first African-American into the Pro Sports Hall of Fame. And when you see the video and you take a look, you see that not only did Emlyn Tunnell make an enormous impact on the sport of football, but he also serves as an enormous inspiration to us all about being bold and following your dreams. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Jim. I know he would like to say a few words, and then Jim Doling will tee up the video.
I'm going to stay right here. I think I can talk loud enough for everybody to hear.
No, come on up. Yeah, come on up. While you're coming, I want to make note of the fact that if all of you have had an opportunity to see any part of the exhibition in this building, the Delaware County Sports Hall of Fame, Jim is the man that's responsible for it. Personally created it all with some help, and came to us for permission to use our building. We have lots of room here. And every time I come in the building, I find something new that I didn't know about. I stop and linger and study. And so I'm very proud. I hope this museum or this exhibition, I guess it's not an exhibition, it's permanent, is here on a permanent basis. Okay? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Brad Now, who's going to be will be the genesis behind the video that you're going to be seeing. And it's a perfect segue into your Resolution 2016-27, Black History Month. And without further ado, you might have a couple questions after the video that Brad will be willing to entertain.
Well, thank you. It's a real honor to be here, and I think it's pretty apropos that I'm here during Black History Month, because right now at Comcast Sportsnet every week we're running a feature that I am responsible for. We're actually having one again tonight. But this ran as our first selection of the month, and I've been bothered by Jim Vankowski for the last dozen years after I met him during a beginning photo shoot with the great Mickey Vernon. And I just got to be thankful and tell you how thankful that you guys should be to have somebody like Jim Vankowski in Delaware County, because this town, even though I'm from a neighboring county in Montgomery County, I grew up in Souderton, Jim has kind of taken me under his wing, and as a television story producer, photographer, editor, he's got a wealth of information, and this county is remarkable. And for somebody like me who loves history, who loves sports, and loves the human side of what we love to see every day, I mean, Jim has just been a remarkable asset to me and to Comcast Sportsnet. But he came to me and he said, listen, we have this gentleman named Emlyn Tunnell, and I obviously researched him, and it is amazing that how he changed the game and not only became the first African American to be inducted into Pro Football Hall of Fame, but to become a war hero as well. And I just appreciate the time being here. It's kind of different for me to be able to see the people that are watching my work, other than just sitting at home and using the remote to move on. So I appreciate your attention. And if you'd like to start.
Go ahead.
Great.
He walked uncharted roads as an adventurer, a pioneer.
There's something to be said about being first.
And as he achieved greatness, he became a legend.
He was one of those guys that wasn't going to let go of his dream.
The journey began here.
This is Garrett Avenue.
In the quiet community of Garrett Hill, in this modest house in Delaware County.
We used to play marbles up this alley here, and then Mrs. Tennell would have us in once in a while for cookies or whatever.
A trip that would eventually take him nearly 6 hours away to Canton, Ohio.
Emlyn Tennell was, in many ways, a player ahead of his time.
Growing up in a multiracial community during depressed times, there was rarely anything Emlyn Tennell couldn't do. This lean, strong, and swift athlete was a two-sport star and excelled whenever he had the ball.
I hope that he gets all the recognition that he deserves.
Childhood friend Bill Lyons is one of the few left from the gang at Garrett Hill.
Beautiful. I walk here just about every day.
Now 86 years old, he remembers the good old days and his good friend Emlyn Tennell.
When he came home, I mean, everybody was glad to talk to him, you know, and be a friend of his.
What Tennell did on this field in the 1930s captured the small town's attention, and his star began to rise.
Tennell was he was the whole team.
Everybody that played with him and played against him said he was probably the best athlete they ever played against.
He was all Delaware County, all suburban, first team All-State, both his junior and senior year. Just without a doubt, one of the best athletes in Delaware County history. He did it all, and during that time period, you did it all.
After suffering a neck injury in college, Tennell enlisted in the Coast Guard, where he would become a war hero, saving 2 lives. Once back home, he hit the road, making his way to Iowa to finish up his college career. Then, by using part of his now famous hands, he arrived on the doorstep of the National Football League.
He literally hitchhiked. He hitchhiked from the West Coast to the East Coast because he wanted to try out with the New York Giants. He hitchhiked a ride on a truck driven by a West Indian man delivering bananas. That's who drove him across the country. He gets to New York and just goes into the New York Giants offices, unannounced, no appointment, nothing arranged, and he just walks in and says, I want to try out. Clearly a different age of pro football that you could do that. You're not going to do that today. But they worked him out, and they realized, well, this guy can really play.
On grit and confidence, he made it to the NFL, writing a new chapter in the game's history book.
Of course, this is very early football, too, and you didn't have nearly as many African Americans playing, and I think the Giants took a chance on him.
Yes, I do believe.
Those early years with the Giants were some of the best teams ever to play. Tennell's presence on defense helped the game evolve, and after a few championships, it was off with his friend Lombardi to Green Bay.
I guess what Lombardi saw in Tennell was his physical ability, number one, that's the obvious. The strength of his character and his desire to play this game. And the other part was his intelligence.
But Tennell's heart never really left Delaware County. It was all about family, and he put his money where his heart was.
This is a house that Emlyn bought for his mother. I think it was his second or third paycheck from the Giants.
When his career ended, he was literally labeled a game changer. His 79 career interceptions were an all-time record. And then Canton came calling.
He was the offense on defense, Emlyn Tennell. He was the all-time leader in punt returns, punt return yardage, punt return average across the board. I mean, he really made a significant impact in the history of the game.
Emlyn Tennell's likeness sits now among the greatest to ever play the game. This bust stands testament to a man who played with character and brilliance, while increasing the awareness for all of us so we can now reflect.
Emlyn Tennell Field.
In a small park off Garrett Street that bears his name, a plaque reminds those passing through of where they are walking.
When you walk on this field, know that you are walking in the footsteps of a giant.
Something Tennell's longtime friend Bill Lyons knew all along.
I just wish he was still here, that's all. Yeah.
Really appreciate your time and your attendance to this, and I'll be around here if anybody's got any questions. I don't want to hold up the meeting, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. You got a gem here, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Brad, thank you.
Jim, could I just add that for those who don't know, there's a park dedicated to his memory, and we're honored to have it in our township and in our ward on Garrett Avenue. It's a park and a field, and I remember that when we dedicated it a few years ago, his surviving relatives were able to come by and share in that honor. And the stories that they told were remarkable about the courage that he had and the fortitude that he had about all the obstacles that were placed in his way. And yet, when you read anything about him, the first thing they say is that everyone loved Emlyn, no matter what happened. Everyone loved him. So we're glad. Thank you.
That's nice. Thank you, Phil. Okay, let's move ahead to our consent agenda. As I say at every meeting, the consent agenda is a series of items that we need to take action on. They items are usually perfunctory in nature in that the township staff has already analyzed and reviewed and researched the elements that comprise each item, and they present the staff presents it to our board for action in a block. Any commissioner and any member of the audience is authorized or permitted to ask that any one item or all of the items be taken out of the consent mode and debated and discussed separately. So I'll ask at this point, does any commissioner want to remove? We have items A through E on the consent agenda. All right, does any member of the audience want to remove any of the items? If not, then I'll take a motion to approve items A through E on our consent agenda.
Move we approve the consent agenda.
All right, it's been moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. It passes 7-0. At this time, we'll go to public participation, and this is normally for people that cannot stay till the end of the meeting, where we open up the microphone to people to talk about any subject on township government that they choose. And so those people that want to come up now are normally people that can't stay for the whole meeting, and you're invited to do so at this time. And I'll repeat what I said. Please hold off on the Willows matter until we get to that item on the agenda. Okay, I don't see anybody coming forward. So we're going to move now to our committee reports, and the first one is the Willows. John Nagel, Parks and Recreation.
Well, the easiest thing to do is just throw this to the floor. As you know, we've had the Parks and Rec Board itself has met on this. The subcommittee of the Board of Commissioners has met on this. The school is proposing to rent the Willows from us and to invest about $1.5 million to $2 million upgrading things, bringing it up to code, repairing it. One of the things we have to work out are the details, and that's always the hard part. And the purpose of tonight is to hear from the public again, and also to provide some direction to staff how we want to move forward with this. So I'll just open it to the floor, or the commissioners first.
I think our manager has been the person that's most heavily involved in the proposal by the applicant, and also the comments and objections by the neighbors. So I'd like to have Bob try to set the framework where we are.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, John. I know that we've had some discussions here over the past probably 3 months here in which the proposal has come forward. I know that over the last, I believe, 4 years, we've had conversations. We've been looking at different options regarding RFPs, in which we've looked at a variety of different uses for the Willows. I think over the last, I know the Parks Board has discussed this. They had come up with a recommendation to look at entering into further negotiations in regards to the Willows with the St. David's Nursery School. CARFAC, our Citizens Audit and Financial Review Committee, had made a recommendation to pursue further negotiations and then to review those terms and conditions. I know that over the last week, we were able to attend the Inverary Homeowners Association meeting, which we thank you for the opportunity to be able to attend that. We've continued to hear various concerns in regards to various issues and topics. I know different residents throughout the community, we've heard their comments and suggestions. We've heard a lot of favorable comments in regards to the use of the willows, the reuse of the building and the structure, to saving the facility for its value and the history that has been there. We've heard a lot of concerns regards to the impact to the park, the open space, a lot of the concerns. What we'd ask the board tonight is to allow the staff additional time to review a lot of these concerns that have been asked of the board, of staff, to allow us time to look at, and the items specifically would be is to look at the impact to the park. I know there's been some environmental concerns that have been brought up, traffic circulation in and around through the park, pedestrian access, how that would work in and around through the park. I know that there are contract terms. I know there's an initial proposal that was made by St. David's Nursery School that a lot of individuals are referencing of how that would work. I know there's some questions in regards to the township subsidizing some of those areas. We want to be able to clarify those because I don't believe there was any subsidies, but we want to go ahead and verify those to make sure those terms and conditions, the township's position is made clear on those. We also, too, as traffic has been a big concern in and around the area, we know that Darby Paoli Road and Brook Road, there was a concern with traffic there and traffic circulation and flow. We know Newtown Road and Darby Paoli, there was a concern there too, as well as the ingress and egress out of Inverary. There was a concern there of line of sight. We would want to look at that. I'd spoken with our traffic engineer and was asking her to propose to bring a proposal to us as the scope that we had spoken about continue to grow. I did not want her costs and expenses to the township to grow, so I had stopped her with that. It's one of the things we would like to ask St. David's Nursery School to retain a firm to perform the traffic study and to work along with the township's, our engineer, and also to engage PennDOT as well into this, because now the scope has to be expanded, which during the Ardrossan study that had taken place, Inverary was not involved in that study, and I think now because of the residents that has to become part of that to be looked at. And I think that's an item, as well as Brook Road and Newtown with Darby Paoli. We already have that data to be able to be looked at. We had talked about establishing a timeline to complete the proposed improvements to the mansion. That was an item of concern, not only to this township staff, but also to St. David's Nursery School, because we know the timeline that they're under to be able to complete their concerns. But also, I think we have to be fair to them that if this is going to be a lengthy, protracted review of the process, I think to be fair to them, we can't tie them up as well and hold them back, because I know they're under a deadline as well to make sure that they have a home for the school when they need to be in some place too. So I think we need to work with them and to establish a realistic time frame of when they may anticipate getting through the review process, but also understanding the scope of work. As part of that, we talked about establishing a PSA, or professional services account, in which the township, which we do with a lot of other developers too, in which there is an account in which escrow dollars are deposited that cover the expenses of the township for our review of plans, which means our engineers who review the plans, our professionals who review, those costs are covered by the proposer or the developer here, which would be St. David's Nursery School. Also, too, we would establish a clear and definitive plan for the improvements to be completed to the mansion. I know there's some questions there. I know we had spoken with Wade on that. I believe those are pretty much detailed already of what that work is going to be done. I think we just need to detail what those are and kind of have a sketch plan of what that's going to look like, so that's way the board and the public knows fully of what's going to be done to the mansion. So everyone has a good understanding of what that would be. Provide a proof and evidence of the financial resources to complete the project, that funds are available to actually what you're going to propose to do. You actually have the financial resources to complete those. What we're looking at is asking the board to give us time to work with St. David's Nursery School to look at putting this all together, coming back to the board on March 14th and presenting to you what we find, and provide the board with a detailed report that contains all this information for the board to look at. We would hope to have this to the board a week in advance, which would be March 7th, for the public to review as well as the board to review. So this way everybody would have the opportunity to review all this, have questions. The board would have the opportunity to review this, raise questions, so that it's not presented, delivered on the 14th, and then everyone's wondering what's going on, so that everyone would have enough time to be able to ask those questions. But hearing the questions, hearing the concerns, I think we feel more comfortable being able to ask these questions, define a lot more of the terms and conditions to clear up a lot of questions that I think sit out there in the community. I think there are a lot of valid questions that have been asked. I also think there's some questions that are kind of out there, but I guess that's just my opinion, but I think you're always going to have a few of those. But I think there are some valid questions that deserve being addressed, and be able to put fact in there to where we can address those. I think there are ones that sit in Inverary. I think the residents have made some good, legitimate concerns and questions that have to be addressed, and I think those have to be fact-based to where we need to look at of the impact to their neighborhood, which sits directly across from there. And I think it's worth the time to do that, not only for the township, but I also think St. David's Nursery School has been a good tenant and a resident to Radnor Township. A good portion of their students and parents are Radnor Township residents, and I think we need to give them full due diligence and the time to understand their proposal and give it full and thorough review and to make that decision. So I think on both ends, we need to take the time to look at it of what the impact is to the park, but then also too is to the school, but also too is when we look at the Willows Park, it's been something that is an asset to this township. It's a jewel to the community. There's extreme value there, and it's something that I think this community treasures, and we want to make sure we protect that asset, but also too, the mansion is one that in a survey we did back in, I believe it was 2012, 2011, 2012, it was clear that everyone loves the mansion and sees value to that. And we have looked at a number of options to be able to maintain that structure. And this is one that has that opportunity for that. But again, it's the impact to the surrounding neighborhood and the community, that at what cost does it take to do that? And what we're asking the board for is to allow us this additional time to put all the facts together for this and to take in all the concerns from not only Commissioner Curley, who has raised the issues on behalf of his residents, but also the residents in that area, but also to those residents who have spoken in favor of protecting the mansion and those who have spoken in favor of the school. So I know it's a...
Okay. Bob, have you told the applicant or the school about this?
Yes, we've spoken.
Set of items and the timetable? Okay, now, are they here tonight?
Yes, they are.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes, they are.
Do you contemplate having them speak before
no.
we hear from the rest of the audiences? Mr. McDevitt, where are you? Do you have anything to add at this point to what Bob outlined?
No, I think that was fairly comprehensive. I think there was a lot of bad information floating around. I think taking the opportunity.
You better come up to him.
And was Devin Parker or who's
Asked me in a few months. I think there's a lot of erroneous information floating around, and I think whatever platform we need to provide the opportunity to clarify some of the facts. To clarify some of the facts would be appreciated. I think, obviously, as you've mentioned, there's some timing issues and concerns that we are obviously extraordinarily worried about. So, to the extent that we can, accelerate this process to allow us still the privilege and the opportunity to occupy the wills, if ultimately that's what you determine is appropriate, we'd like to be able to do so. We just ask that, once again, we ask you make a decision based on the facts, not on some of the bad information and erroneous information.
All right. You don't want to say anything informally at this point?
We were told that was not expected this evening, so we're not prepared to, other than to say that, I can certainly mention that. I think some of the points that we've heard and floating around in the marketplace have been comments regarding how intrusive our use would be to the park. We think at 160 small children occupying the structure within a contained and controlled environment is not intrusive. As a matter of fact, of all the uses we've heard proposed for the park, it seems to be the least intrusive and the most compatible use for the park. Environmental exposure and subsidy was also mentioned. The qualification and requirement we put in the letter of intent asking the property be delivered free and clear of environmental issues was not meant to be onerous. Our contractors have been to the property. We don't see evidence of anything of concern, but obviously you have to conduct your own due diligence. There's been some comments that idling vehicles would result in polluting the pond and killing trees. If that were the case, our 47 years of occupancy contiguous to a current park, there wouldn't be much of a park remaining. And the same would be true of every school in our community. There would be very few trees remaining and obviously other residual effects. Safety, as professionals, we've been charged with caring for children for 47 years. Thousands of students have safely matriculated through the school without incident. It's actually bordering on offensive for others to question our ability to maintain a safe environment at St. David's. We've clearly demonstrated our ability to do that, and we've done it extraordinarily well. Traffic, I think traffic is a valid concern and a legitimate one, and I don't blame Inverary for having that concern. And we welcome the opportunity to work with appropriate engineers and experts to determine whether that is something we should be worried about, and if there's anything we can do to mitigate that issue that's within our control. But we think that is a legitimate concern that should be addressed and should be discussed openly. I think other uses have been contemplated here, such as a catering facility, which I think had proposed having several hundred events per year, is a far more noxious use than our use. As a friend of mine said, unless we want to hear whip and nay-nay every Saturday night for the next few years and have alcohol and late night noise issues coming out of that park on a regular basis, I think that our use is a preferred use to that, of course. And once again, I just ask you to try to, I think as commissioners, I think your responsibility, and not to tell you what you're supposed to do, I think you already know that or you wouldn't have accepted this role, is to filter out the noise and isolate the facts and make decisions based on those facts. And I think once that is completed, I'm confident that will result in you determining that St. David's is a wonderful use for the park, that's an amenity for the township, and it's a gift. And we see it as a gift to have the opportunity to occupy that with the school. So it's really, as I said, I was not prepared to speak this evening, but I'll share those nuggets.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Welcome. Thank you. Okay, I think at this point it's time for us to hear from residents. Did you want to say something first?
Do we want to structure this so that we have St. David's folks go first and then Inverary folks go next? Do we want any order? Or you want to leave it alone?
I'd rather not turn it into a competition.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I would add, Jim, though, that we don't need 40 people lining up to say exactly the same thing. So, and I know Inverary, for example, their president of their board's here. I would hope that he would speak for the group. And then people who have different takes, different concerns, they would get up and add.
That's always been the method that our board has tried to use. Try not to repeat the same thing that somebody else has said. If you have a representative that can speak for half a dozen or a dozen, designate her or him, and that will expedite matters. I don't want to cut down anybody's right or silence anybody's right to talk. because I understand you all have investments in the community. You love Radnor, I'm sure, and you have a lovely neighborhood at Inverary. In fact, I was on the board in the 80s or early 90s when we approved Inverary. It was Larry Flick partnering with Roach Brothers. So the last thing is we do like to have you limit your comments in time, subject, of course, to not repeating other people's comments. Try to limit them to the absolute maximum of 5 minutes per person, okay? All right, thank you. First person? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Joseph Reiser. I live at 500 Heather Circle in the famous, now infamous Inverary. And I appreciate your comments, and in the interest of time, I will attempt to speak for Inverary residents as at large. However, I would like to emphasize that we have many residents who have their own opinions, and they may have a certain element or an aspect that they would like to bring to your attention. So I don't consider I'm speaking for everyone officially, but I will, in that sense, maybe be a touch longer, but hopefully we'll pick up time as a result. First of all, I do appreciate the summary by the Township Manager very much. I think it's a constructive view of the situation, and it was not one that we understood coming in tonight, because we thought tonight was a vote to proceed with the negotiations. And that's the way it was positioned to us. So I think the summary was quite balanced, and I think it was realistic, and it tells us you're listening to input, and I think that's very nice to see. Let me preface one other comment. We are not against schools. We're also not against children. So this isn't about the school. I'm sure St. David's is a fine school, and if I had young children today, I'm sure I would probably seek to have them enrolled there. That's what I heard, at least. However, we are, if you will, while we are not against schools per se, we are very much for open space. And in that regard, I've lived here 11 years. I don't have the history that you have, in particular about Inverary, which is interesting to hear. We very much support the efforts that the township has realized in maintaining open space. I, for one, would pay my taxes every day and more of it if that was the issue. So in that sense, we were somewhat perplexed by the proposal, because the proposal, putting a school into a private institution in a public space, essentially restricts the space. It doesn't enhance the use by residents. And I think this is truly the issue, I think the primary issue. So in that sense, tonight I want to communicate my strong, personally, and also for Inverary residents, strong objections to this proposal. And I will try to summarize the three key points, and I'll keep it as brief as possible. So in that sense, I do want to recognize the Inverary residents, and if you don't mind to raise your hand in terms of who you are today, to see that there is quite a concerned community here tonight in view of this proposal. The first and the most critical point is the point about that the Willows is a park. It's not intended, in our view, and never thought of as being a park used by a private institution. I think we have paid for this as residents, and we continually would support that as residents. I spent a lot of time reviewing this, and I have to submit, and I've talked about our board with this, and we are unanimous in this context. We have found no net positive for us, the residents. Yes, I understand the quid is enhancing the mansion that so many people seem to be enamored with. But let's face it, it's a crumbling building, and it will take a lot to enhance. And I'm not sure if it's really possible. But putting that aside, the mansion will be refurbished for the use of a school, not for adults, not for broader use in mind. That's the dominant refurbishing goal. Therein, I heard we can use the mansion on the weekends. Well, I have immediate fears of my days when I remember parents-teacher meetings at night where I had to sit on the little chairs or the little tables to try to listen to how my son was doing. I'm not sure what piece of the refurbishing will be for adults. And I don't mean to be facetious, but I think when I go to a bathroom these days at my age, I look for comfort height facilities. I don't know what kind of facilities will there be for other adults, if you will, in this refurbishing. So overall, my estimate is that the mansion can be used approximately 25% of the time for non-school activities. That's an estimate. I may not be quite correct, but it's something like that. And in that sense, it is restrictive. It's restrictive in terms of the fencing that will be placed around the school. Remember, this is a daily event, all day long. It's restrictive in terms of parking by staff. The staff is about 40, so I understand. That's 40 cars taking up a permanent parking space all day long for the staff. You can imagine the parade of cars that will go through the park, which means the streets will have to be changed to one way because you can't have both ways, and part of the streets are two ways right now. And this will be a parade of cars every single day. And can you just imagine this for 20 years? I submit to you, by 20 years, by 10 years, by 5 years, this is no longer a park. It's a school with precious land around it that we paid for. And we paid for that use. And everyone is happy and willing to do this, but not at a cost of changing the nature of the park. To me, this is clearly the issue that everyone is most concerned and the most highest priority. And for what? For $45,000 a year? I know it'll go up. I submit when you look at all of the proposal, and I realize it could change, there will be liabilities associated with this that the township will not be able to separate from, which end up as, I think, a negative dollar balance at the end of the process. So 25% use, limited income. I heard this is a win-win for residents and for the school. I'm sorry, but we've only come up with a win for the school on this basis. That's with the information we know, that's certainly our conclusion. Point number 2, to enhance the time here a bit, traffic congestion. If there's a resident here that knows about traffic around the Willows, it's the Inverary resident. We face this every single day. We have a single road in and out of Inverary, same day. So many of us go 3, 4, 5 times a day in and out of Inverary. Try it yourself one time during rush hour. You take your life in your hands because on the right hand you're dodging cars coming over the hill that you don't see until they go over the hill, and then they speed up. On the left side you see cars starting to speed up from the Newtown Darby-Paoli intersection, and you try to squeeze in between. We've had accidents by residents being hit at that entrance. We have, I can tell you, it's a truly traumatic process, and I'm pretty good with driving cars, but we have a lot of elderly residents who are not so sure all the time. It's a really traumatic effort each and every day. Now, traffic is constantly increasing. Episcopal came online, our traffic increased probably by 20 to 30%, I'm guessing. Drawson traffic, you just heard we weren't part of the proposal. That's not even started yet because they're just building the homes. I don't know how many cars are probably part of this mix. Darby-Paoli is becoming the unofficial Route 30 bypass, in my view. A lot of people feel that way. It just is constant traffic. According to police records, 8,300 cars pass the stretch of the, what is the stretch of the entry, the 2 exits or 2 entrances to Willows, which is the same space as Inverary, every single 24 hours a day, 8,300 cars. There have been 2 accidents a year. I submit to you there will be more. And 2 accidents is simply too much. Now add to that picture the school. I calculate the impact of, if you say, take for example 200 students, and maybe 160, just take 200 as an example. And assume 1 car per student. Each car has to go in and out Willows 4 times. That's the impact of 800 cars. Add to that the staff of 40 cars twice a day, that's 880. Now, some of you may say this is voodoo math. I can assure you it's real math, and you can do the analysis yourself. So this is not a minor issue for us. And then there's one other aspect which you perhaps haven't thought about, and maybe the township manager can consider this. We know how this works. In the morning, when the school starts, cars come in, they line up, and they go up to the entrance of the mansion, and the child gets dropped off. If you measure the distance from the entrance of the Willows to the door of where they're getting dropped off, it's 2,062 feet. If you take the average car length, which is a Suburban, and the school suggests to use a Suburban is 18.6 feet. Make it 20 feet, you need a little room between cars. That's little over 100 cars in that stretch. Well, 160 students, don't take 200. That's 57 cars that can't go into that stretch at the same time. Where are they going to be? They're going to be backing up on the roads. Now, I realize not everybody will be exactly at the same time, but I think the point is clear. So you will have further backup through that process. And then when they go through the park, exit the other way, you're going to have the same effect. And there they hit Newtown Darby Pioli entrance. And by the way, if some of you have gone there, it's taking your life in your hand again, because you never know who's going to stop coming straight across on the Darby Pioli side. I've experienced it personally myself. So the traffic is a real issue, and I realize the traffic study will be done, which we're certainly grateful for. I don't see any conclusion other than this is going to be a nightmare traffic-wise for everyone. And I haven't even talked about the little bridge that's made for 1.5 cars, not 2 cars, but 2 cars go across every day. Try to put a bus across there, forget it. That'll be another backup of minutes. You know, the entrance to the Willows is right by the bridge. It's the worst place. And by the way, there are no pedestrian entrances. It's all cars. It's just an impossible situation. Last point, the value of the proposed deal. Now, I will speak only briefly on this because it was clear that this has not been fully negotiated. I only can comment from what is publicly available, which is the term sheet. My sense is this was rushed, and now I'm certainly recognize that we're catching up with that, and we will look at this much more carefully. Very much appreciated. But based upon the terms that we saw today, this is a bad deal. It is simply not in the interest, even financially, in our view. When you go into the details of maintained liabilities by the township, insurance, trash removal, snow plowing, widening the roads, I can't imagine that you come out positive with this, but I defer comments since not all the detail is in. So, and also my last concern on this point is the long-term lease. I've been in business for 38 years. I've been humbled more than once with leases. I can assure you, you start with a 15-year lease. There will be issues through that time that you wish you could get out of or change the lease. We've all been through this, and I'm sure most of you who have legal backgrounds can have a better experience than I do. I'm very concerned about a long-term lease from that perspective, if it goes forward. So those are the 3 main points. However, since I've been a bit critical of the proposal here, it also behooves me you could easily say, well, do you have any solutions? I don't have a ready solution, but I have an observation and a suggestion. The observation, and again, from my purview, 11 years, not as close as many of you has been to this, it seems to me many of the initiatives that you have identified to solve the problem of the Willows in terms of cost have come from Radnor to residents, and essentially it has been a reactionary response in many ways. So like this proposal, we haven't even heard about this. There was no public notice that we were aware of, and I don't think anyone in Inverary was in tune to this. I know there was a blurb in a newspaper during the holidays, but not everyone prescribes with a newspaper. So my point is, these proposals come out to us, the residents, and we react to it. As a result, you have many questions, and some of them perhaps not as accurate in their interpretation. So my suggestion is make residents part of the solution from the beginning and have there in the buy-in. For example, many residents that I talk to would support demolishing the mansion because of its condition and the risk of improving it. And yet, you know, one should look at that as part of the logic. I know there was an alternate proposal recently put forth by a resident on what we could do if we demolished the mansion, and I thought that sounded very reasonable in many ways. Hold a public forum on the Willows. It's such a sensitive topic. It's a great park. It is such an asset for Radnor. Let people be part of them. Challenge them to be part of them. And then I think they'll be part of the solution. Consider ways to raise private funds. It can be done. I've done it in a number of ways, and many of you, I'm sure, have been as well. Appoint a volunteer committee, and I can assure you I'll be in the front of that line. And so will be all of these people probably that have just raised their hands. So these are some thoughts. I'm confident there must be a better way.
Thank you, Ms. How do you pronounce your last name, Reiser or Reiser?
Reiser, R-E-I-S-E-R.
Thank you.
Can I just comment on one thing about notice? You were before us in the end of December, I think. They were before us. Then before Parks and Rec, before CARFAC, all this has been out there online. So nothing's been hidden. This township puts everything up online. If you go on their website, which I have a habit of doing, being a commissioner, if you go on their website, even once a week, you'll see all this stuff out there. It's all out there for you to consume, take in, get notice of, show up for. So there's been plenty of notice, in my opinion.
I think the notice has been short, meaning that what we did is this was a proposal. I'll recognize, or I believe the alternative was a worse proposal than this. So I'm delighted that the catering facility did not go through. But largely, this became relevant circa December, and I reached out to this group probably the first week in January. And if all you do is sit around and wait for the township, or you follow the township on a day-to-day basis, this might have moved at a pace that is acceptable to us. But residents are trying to live lives. They're not paying attention like we are, and so it is not at a pace. It's moving at a pace that's fast for them. It might be appropriate for us, but I believe it's fast for the residents of Invery.
Okay, thank you, Don. Let's go ahead now. Let's let. I don't want to get into the notice thing. Let's hear from some of the other people. Okay, thank you. If we have time at the end, then you can come back and talk about notice.
I mean, we do shy away from point counterpoint.
Oops. I brought some gifts for the New Year's. I gave you guys cookies, Jim. It's not a bribe. Hi, Leslie Morgan. I thought I'd get my opinion out of the way, or my thoughts, because mine is totally different.
And your name and address.
I'm Leslie Morgan. I live in Jim's ward, Ward 1, and that is at 12 Farm Road in Radnor, Pennsylvania. I've been here for about 13 years now. And I come to meetings quite regularly, except for the last 3. And I think that most people don't. We know that. And so, Luke, you're new, but there would be no reason they would know about this during the holidays. They wouldn't pick that up. I totally agree that they probably got blindsided by it. That being said, we've looked at Willows for what? 3 or 4 years, 5 years, I know, Elaine. And I totally support a private-public partnership. We've failed twice now with 2 caterers. Now a school, actually a preschool, has proposed this option. And I'm not really pro or against it, but I think that there is liability for the township. And I wrote like 3 pages of notes, and I don't think I'm going to go through all 3 pages at this time. But one of the things that I know that we made that negotiating period so long with the 2 caterers is we didn't bank qualify them immediately. That's what I say in my mind. To the public's mind who's listening, it's a school that's been in operations for 47 years. I congratulate them. They are now losing, I guess, their lease, or they choose to move somewhere else. They would have a banking relationship if they're a real, operation. And so before, one of my suggestions is what Bob said. Immediately qualify their credit and know that they have the ability to get a line of credit for $1.5 million to $2 million. I like that higher number. And who their bank is, because we wasted a lot of time with the previous two caterers because they talked a big game, and lots of people talk a big game. But we're not here to subsidize this adventure. And so that is my main thing, credit. Just like our credit rating got downgraded 2 things and we climbed back up 1, we have bank relationships. They have bank relationships. So I would cut to the chase and ask them to qualify themselves immediately. The other thing I wanted to say is, in terms of the park and what the taxpayers pay for, it is absolutely clear in my mind that when 40% of our balance sheet, or thereabouts, I might be off by 5 points, you guys, is now indebted to open space and parks, nobody would have done those deals if they said, oh, we're going to have this person's preschool come on down and we're going to subsidize it that way. I may remind you, this board, which I was totally against, you turned down an incredibly lucrative deal for cell towers that had no traffic impact. And I think they were $565 a pop, and there was 3 or 4 proposed. And then that was only for 10 years. Is this gone off? Hello? Hello? Oh, okay. Well, anyways, I want the people on the video to hear me as well, because I think this is an important point. So we're interested in $45,000 a year, but we weren't interested in a clean $1.5 million to $2 million for a 10-year deal with no environmental impacts of fumes, okay, and traffic impact.
There's a whole other story there.
To me, it isn't, and I wanted to bring up my thought because it's different than either side. I will close with this. I think it's very important that we look at the cost of demolition, because in our ward, Jim's ward, right now the line item on demolishing a 6,000 or 4,000 square foot one-story structure in the bonds that we just floated is a $150,000 line item in the Fenimore Park. That's what you have in there, $150,000. So goodness knows what tearing down the Willows would be. So I have a different one. The school likes it, and they can do some rehabbing. They think it's structurally okay, or maybe they do. Let's sell it in a conservation easement to a nice one family in Radnor. What a view. You could really get some good money. I mean, Eddie's selling a half an acre at Ardrossan with no view compared to this view for $1.5 million. I like that idea. Invite one nice family to rehab it. You get your structure, you get your view, and it's just one nice family. A lot of families would love to rehab that project. Thank you.
Has anybody here been around long enough to remember the Moonies that moved into Radnor? Were any of you living here? I was living here, but I don't remember any of the details, but we had a problem with the Moonies occupying a house and ruining the whole neighborhood. Anyway.
Well, that's a cult. That's a cult. That's not a family.
Okay. Now, please come forward if you want to. Any other people from Mr. Reiser did such a fine job representing his organization that. Okay, sir. You want to?
I'll let an Inverurie person speak, and then I'll go next. Thank you. I'm Sandy McElwain. I live at 416 Inverurie. I've been there for 20 years. I've been in real estate for 39 years. I know that there will be an impact on the voter home values of all the neighborhood developments, so all the neighboring developments. One reason they move into Inverurie is because of the park. It is an asset, just like you said. Certainly not the taxes, but I guess I'm here for the bigger reason, the safety issue. There'll be a lot of safety issues. In fact, my husband was almost killed because when they come over that hill between the exit and the entrance, and we're turning left to get in Inverurie, they don't have enough time to react and stop. So when we're turning in, we're always looking in our rear view mirror, getting ready to step on the gas. The other thing is when our residents walk in the Willows, they walk on the roads. There are no walking paths in there. So I'm just saying there's a safety issue there. I just want to say to all these lovely young people, we all have we're mostly all retired. And we moved there because it's, okay. Okay, the two of you that aren't.
Some of you look great for retirement.
Thank you. And we're not all
So
on the
true.
line.
So true.
That's our biggest problem, right? Anyway, what I wanted to say was we all grew up in the area. We raised our kids in the area. Someday you're going to all end up in Invery because it is a great location. You don't have to maintain the grounds. We have a great president, great neighborhood, great people. But we want to keep it safe. And we've got 100 cars going in and out of our Invery Road every day. So there is congestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Matkov. I want to start by saying thank you to the commissioners for the service. I live at 266 Ravenscliff. I also sit on the 3-member homeowners association with Larry Flick that supervises all of Ravenscliff, Round Hill, all of the homes on Darby Paoli, and all of the open space, the duck ponds, which is contiguous to the Willows Park. With all due respect to my Invery neighbors, I would hope that they are not the only neighborhood that gets a say on whether or not this moves forward. In my community alone, there are at minimum 5 families that are either former or current students of the park. In my role as council, I've heard absolutely 0 negative comments for the process moving forward.
Did you say students of the park?
Or, excuse me, students of the school. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as a Radnor resident, Mr. Curley, I'm in your ward, Ward 6. I urge you to move forward and to approve this school for kind of the following reasons. One, we've talked about a lot of impact on the park and the continuous public use. I can think of nothing better than a nursery school that would not affect the morning joggers, would not affect the afternoon joggers, would not affect the weekend family members that would use the park for a variety of reasons. I'm sure the traffic study would bear out, but just from my personal knowledge of where our students live from, there's a good amount of them that are going over Darby Paoli Road already on their way to St. David's, and having to stop before Willows might actually benefit some of these township residents as well. As far as the mansion itself, as a resident of Radnor Township, I don't think incurring the cost to tear down a historic area is in any way beneficial to the township whatsoever. I don't need to remind you of your duties, fiduciary and otherwise, to make sure that we're preserving township assets for a going forward basis, and that we're not making a decision now that's easy to tear something down that would be valuable 50 or 100 years from now. I grew up in Southern California. We don't have any historic buildings like that, and the thought that we would even tear something down is just horrifying to me, frankly. On the third, I would offer my assistance to the council to the extent you want Ravenscliff and Round Hill and all of the residents along Darby Paoli to equally participate in the voice for whether or not this school is moved forward. I'm happy to work with Larry Flick to move that forward, but like I said, I have not heard it, and I don't want a neighboring community, while they have legitimate concerns, to have an outsized voice, considering there are a lot of our other very nice neighborhoods right around there that would be equally impacted. And I would say, fourth, just from a personal point of view, I can't think of anything better than children's voices in the morning, and joy and learning and nature. Maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know what it is, but I listen to you guys speak. So,
respectful
for a variety
to
of
the other
reasons, I hope that you move forward with the proposal. I'm happy to assist in any way that I can in representing my neighborhood, and or anything else going forward. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Mrs. Makov.
Hi, my name is Anthony Spataco. I'm a new resident of Inverary. I just settled on a home on January 15th. I'm actually moving from Atterbury Road, so I'm very well aware of the new highway that we have basically between Route 30 and Route 252. Just a couple of questions. I wasn't aware of the notice, but I do think that it's prudent to have at least more time to consider all these questions. And thank you for the job that you did. With regard to the mansion, I've been around construction my whole life, and I've done a lot of, built my own house, et cetera. I'm wondering, first of all, I'd love to know what the value what the historic value is. Is anyone actually aware of what the architectural style of the mansion is, or what it actually means, other than the fact that it's old? The other question about the neighborhoods, there's clearly, I mean, I'm not even lived in, I don't even live there yet. I haven't occupied the home. Clearly, there's a lot of people from this neighborhood, not many from the neighborhoods that seem to be approving of it. The one main question I do have is, just because I found out about this within the past week, what exactly is the benefit? And if there is something that was put out, like on the website or whatever, that defines exactly what the benefit is to the township, other than whatever it is, the money, I'm not asking you to define it now. I'm just saying if there's something that I can read that defines what that is, I guess what the quid is. I understand the quo can be altruistic and the sound of children's voices, but
well, I think
exactly
you heard Commissioner Nagel briefly describe what, in his view, the benefit is, and that is there's annual rent, and there's a very large capital investment to upgrade the structure to current requirements, code requirements. So right now, we don't have either one of those coming into the township. No capital and no operating revenue. So there's a benefit right there.
Okay, so with that 25% use, we would accrue to that renovation would accrue to the benefit.
I don't know if 25% is the right number or not. We're going to find things out. As our township manager has said, this is a process we're going to have more fact-finding. We'll have some fact-finding tonight, and then we'll have a new presentation or at least a written submittal by the applicant. So we'll be learning things like 25% or 2% or
No,
98%.
I was just curious because I don't know about the figure either. Because we all know if you've been involved with any renovation, the figures are always quite light. With regard to public use, public space, private use, is there any reference, again, online or whatever, to the actual original purchase of the property and any limitations on the use thereof? Can I look up any document that would specify those uses, future uses?
Well, we're going back to 1971,
Okay.
and the price was bargain basement.
Right.
It was going to be developed or it was going to be saved by the township. And
But what were the terms?
Commissioner Spengler, who recently retired in July, led the effort to save it from the family, I think it was the Zanziger family, which was Suburban Water Company.
Mhm.
Now, you want to know what the appraised value then was?
No. I was just wondering whether there are any stipulations on the use of the property.
To the best of my knowledge,
I'm sorry.
To the best of my knowledge, there was never a specific stipulation, a charter someone suggested in one of the emails of that kind of thing. It was bought to be a park, and then the building was there. In fact, twice they were very close to selling the building, and the deals fell through.
So there is no document in the archives of
there's probably a bill of sale or a deed.
There's a deed. There's a deed. Yeah, there's a deed.
Okay, and it's on
and there's
record?
there's meeting minutes when the property was
right,
and they're all.
Who would I call for that? To try to get access to that?
Probably John Rice.
No.
Jennifer DeStefano down at the end of the.
Yeah.
Shrinking away. Okay.
I would also add that most people don't know the history of it, but in fact, the developer had purchased the land and had engineering done to build many houses in there.
Uh-huh.
And public pressure and then a few people with vision saved it for what it is today.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, come ahead.
Hello there. My name is Carrie Pratt, and I am in Donald Curley's ward. Thank you very much.
And your street address or street?
564 Maplewood Avenue in Wayne. I do have a student at St. David's. I hope to have 2 next year. And there's 2 things I would like to mention. First of all, I live on Maplewood Avenue, which abuts up next to the road which you enter the current school. There's a lot of traffic because there's also a middle school, a elementary school on that road. But when I leave to take my children in the morning to get to St. David's, and when I go to pick them up, it's actually not during what would be the normal rush hour on that road. So I don't encounter pretty much any cars at all when I go to leave, except for a couple of the ones that are coming to drop students off. And so I wanted to offer that perspective. Secondly, I appreciate that the school has a very staggered drop-off, or a staggered pickup, which means that there's not a whole rush of school. Excuse my nervousness. I'm not used to public speaking. There's not a whole rush of parents waiting all at once to pick up their kids all at once. So that leads to a less congested factor. I hear traffic is one of the main concerns. Lastly, I'd like to say that I've worked in wilderness education. I was an instructor for the National Outdoor Leadership School, and 10 years ago, and even back then, inspiring kids to get out into nature was very important. That was even before all the phones and the iPads and everything like that. And preserving these open spaces is only going to be important if we can make it important to our young children and in their lives. And St. David's is really trying to cast a broad net of showing kids how valuable and important nature is. And in a space like the Willows, they would be able to create a wonderful environment for kids to learn about natural and open spaces, and not just to be sitting on iPads and iPhones and computer devices. And I think if we're looking at the future and we're looking at the generations, we need to consider what that type of education is going to be rather than being stuck in a schoolroom. So I want to offer that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm Haley Erdlin. I'm in Ward 4, Elaine. I live at 7 Meadowwood Road. I am in support, I'm in support of St. David's moving to the Willows. I'm kind of mad, though, because Carrie took all my points, pretty much. But I just want to say, one, I drive to and from the Willows every day that I take my daughter to school. But I also drive at 8:50, so I don't encounter much traffic. And pretty much every person I'm either behind or I see coming past me is actually a parent of St. David's. We do our wave and we go on. To address just something that someone said here, he said that public use of the mansion after hours when the school closes at 3:30 and the weekends, the first floor, if you had read the proposal, will not be altered at all. There will not be little chairs. We'll only have a reading room, we'll have a playroom and offices, but it'll pretty much be able for residents to have different events that we talked about at the Parks and Rec meeting, PTA, Boy Scouts, anything. So that's something that we're keeping in mind, and I just wanted to clarify that. But as a Radnor Township resident who is very proud to live in Radnor, to have my child to be able to go to school in the Willows is an amazing experience for them. They're the future generation of Radnor, so I hope that you will consider this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
A little short. Can't get up to me. Hello, my name is Joel Lawson. I live at 888 Parks Run Lane, and I have a little experience I want to share. First of all, I'm as old as this group over here, but I'm speaking in favor of the school. 35 years ago, I lived in TE in Paoli. And we had 3 kids, and they went to St. David's Nursery School. We drove from Paoli over to where it is today, same place, and drove back. The traffic on Valley Forge Road, South Valley Forge Road there, you know, that's a nasty little road too. The suburbs out here are full of them. So I think when the traffic study is done, I hope that the actual usage will be what's looked at, not a selection of how many kids there are multiplied by 4 trips and so forth. Because the fact is, when you pick up kids or drop off kids there, you notice that there are lots of doubles, occasionally triples, but lots of doubles. And the kids don't all arrive and go at the same time.
You mean double, you mean carpool?
I mean that there are people who have 2 kids there.
Okay.
You're crazy enough to have 3, right?
Yeah, and some are crazy enough to have 3. I stand before you. 4 years separate my oldest and my youngest. They were all there at the same time at one point. So it is important to look at the traffic study based on the actual usage, not a theoretical usage, and you can do that because the school's been there for 47 years with people coming in and out of a nasty little entrance on a road where you can't see in either direction. So I admit that it's not as much traffic. Honest to God, I've been on all the roads in the community. So I moved to my home now 24 years ago, which actually gives me seniority on some of the seniors that I'm talking to. So I would like to have, as the Inverary people did, I'd like to see if there are Radnor Township parents who would like the school to be in Radnor Township. Could you raise your hands? Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that the hand-raising event was symmetrical. The other thing is that this is an amazing asset for any town that has it. The kids who go there, the kids who get that experience, come out equipped to do whatever they want at the age of 6, if you can imagine it. I mean, they know a lot more than a kid that doesn't have that opportunity. And so I would love to see it located in Radnor Township. I would love to see an opportunity to save that beautiful park up there and the mansion. I think to say it's just a financial benefit is a mistake, because there's another benefit, which is Radnor Township capturing, if you want to use that term, one of the best nursery school educational institutions around. And again, I would remind my friends here, nursery school. These kids are unlikely to wild. They're probably not going to cross the street to come into Inverary. They're going to be in the building or under supervision all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Okay, I think this is the most dignified and respectful group we have had on a big issue in a long, long time, and I thank you very, very much for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Come on.
My question is, do you have 3 children at the school? I'm sorry, sir. Did you
Get in front of the microphone.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry. Did you say you have 3 children at the school?
No. Then I wouldn't be participating in this if I did. No.
That's what I was wondering.
No. I have 3 kids, 4 and under, so I get,
You understand, yeah.
I'm in it. I hear it.
Yeah, well, we're in favor of schools too, but not where that is. Okay.
You want to give us your name?
Sure. Barbara Aliva. That would be ALLEVA.
Okay.
457 Inverary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, please, come ahead.
Hello, my name is Wendy McDevitt. Thank you all for all the hard work you do and your leadership. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about maybe some of the comments we're hearing, just to give a couple of opinions. I don't remember the date of the meeting, but I think it was the Parks
Just
and
step back
Rec.
a little bit, then you don't distort. Okay?
Can you hear me now?
That's great.
Okay. I think it was a Parks and Rec meeting that was held. And there was a gentleman sitting over here, and I don't remember your name or exactly what you did, but I think that, John, you had asked for a financial report. And I think the gentleman here from Inverary was very articulate when you talked about the economic decisions or the impacts of this decision, and which I think is a good question, because certainly the township does not want to go negative with any of the decisions they make on the impact of the community. And whoever the gentleman that's out here, I think, gave a very compelling argument or very compelling facts behind the economic impact of this decision and also the impact of other decisions that you are considering over time. And I would actually hope that, I assume that there are video transcripts or other transcripts.
We have our own YouTube link
You're so
on the Radnor
progressive.
website.
Whole
Yes,
channel
it's really-
with everything.
Okay, well, I would actually, since these folks and maybe other folks in the audience actually may have missed that, I would actually ask people to go back to that because it may erase some of your fears on the economic impact, because I thought it was actually quite compelling. And again, forgive me for not knowing who did it, but I thought it was very strong in favor of St. David's doing this, and I am in favor of St. David's doing this. So I would just invite anybody to do that, and I would also want to revisit that as a commission group. The other thing is that I think that as leaders of the community, I would imagine you probably hear from a number of people. Elaine, I'm in your ward. And you hear all kinds of points of view, and you listen to 1,000 people, you get 1,000 different answers about many things. And I think that I would implore you to not make decision by indecisions, and that to be swift with decisions, because at the end of the day, you're all the ones that actually have to vote. And I think you do an amazing job listening, but it is a fact-based decision. And I thank Jess or Joel Lawson for raising the traffic issue, because I do think that was actually quite impactful. And I think that once you also listen to that, between the economic and the traffic impact, which you're rightfully concerned about, I think it would be a swift decision to vote in favor of St. David's. Thank you.
Wendy, did we get your street address?
I'm sorry, 255 Abrams Lane.
Oh,
Thank you.
Hi, I just have one comment. My name is Amy Calabrese. I live at 219 Orchard Way. I am in Mr. Clark's ward, and while Luke may be new to the Board of Commissioners, I can assure you he's very astute and up to date on what is going on, Mrs. Morgan. I would like to propose, based upon what I heard people speak about from Inverary, is that there seems to be a tremendous traffic issue with Inverary, completely separate from anything that is being proposed between St. David's Nursery School and the township. So my proposal would be that we separate this specific traffic issue that seems to be bearing on you every single day without St. David's having a presence at the Willows. And then work with this separately or in conjunction with that. Because I don't think that the addition of kids being transported to and from school in off-peak times at staggered times is going to be that impactful relative to what seems to be a very dangerous situation coming in and out of Inverary. That's all.
I've already asked
Thanks,
the
Amy.
manager to have staff traffic investigate this, because from what I heard from these people, they have some very serious problems today, and it needs to be looked into. One of the things that I'm particularly worried about as we develop our trails network is there's going to be a proposed trail crossing at Newtown and Darby Paoli. Well, obviously, under the current circumstances, that would be literally taking your life into your hands. So this is important information we need.
All right. Is there anybody else? If not, oh, yes, there is. Okay.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Jennifer Stout. I live at 419 West Wayne Avenue. I'm in Ward 6. Don Curley's my commissioner. I'm here to support the movement of St. David's to the Willows Mansion. When I heard that this was a suggested proposal, I thought, wow, isn't this great? That a mansion that is no longer really being used or utilized within the community could come back to use. I have 4 children. 2 of them attend St. David's. My oldest daughter used to attend camps at the Willows Mansion. That no longer seems to happen because of the condition of the building, and it's no longer really of use. And I want to point out that St. David's has been a member of this community for 47 years. I heard someone suggest that why can't people from Radnor bring in proposals to Radnor to the community? And this is a member of our community, and they've brought forward a suggestion that I thought is really good and should be considered. I thought there were some suggestions tonight that St. David's bringing this forward had done this in a sneaky way, bringing it over the holidays. I don't think that was the case at all. I think St. David's has been searching for over a year for a new location for the school, and this was brought to them as a suggestion, and at that point we jumped on it and went through all the proper procedures. And if notice wasn't given to the community, that wasn't in an attempt to hide it. It was just the way that it came about, and trying to move forward because we need a school for next year. The manager over here had said that there was some kind of study that was done that said that the bulk of this community, the Radnor community, wants to save the Willows Mansion. And if we're looking for what the bulk of the community wants, and wants to save it and not tear it down, as some of our other fellow community members have suggested, then to me, the idea that a school would come in and offer to inject private funds to renovate it and then allow it to continue to be used for public use is a win-win for the community, in my opinion. And I understand the concerns of traffic. I mean, that's a concern for everyone in Radnor. I live on West Wayne Avenue. My road is literally a racetrack for people getting back and forth to work every day. And, it's a concern as this community grows. But I think having a traffic study to look at this will be interesting, because I believe that the bulk of the traffic that's already being experienced is traffic that is people going to St. David's already. I don't think St. David's is going to increase that traffic. I think it's probably they're already experiencing the traffic of St. David's. And finally, I appreciate the open space of the Willows more than anyone. Our family uses it probably almost every weekend, and I don't think that a school using just the immediate surroundings of the mansions is going to impact the ability for people to enjoy the trails and the background. And I really sincerely hope that all of the members will consider this and approve it once we're at the point of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stout. Mr. Kelly.
Where are you, Jim? My name is Jack Kelly. I live at 406 Inverary. And the only thing I wanted to say is, and the Inverary members have talked, in the last couple of weeks about this, there's none of us that think that this was a sneaky approach on the part of St. David's, nor on the part of the commissioners. It's just a shortened time frame. Things don't happen real quickly in this township. I've lived here, I think, 24 years, except for 10 months recently, where we sold one house and then moved to Inverary. So it's just that this is an accelerated time frame. It took 4 years to go through the 2 caterers, and there was a lot of discussion. This is a very short time frame because of your need, but it's just a concern for us. So please don't walk away from here thinking that we think that the school tried to sneak this through quickly or that the commissioners did. That's not the way we feel. Thank you.
Okay, Jack, thank you.
Sandy McAleen again. I have a question.
Well, we want to make sure we hear everybody once, and then if we have
Okay.
time, we'll get back to you. Okay?
No problem.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Georgette McCauley. I live at 468 Inverary, and I just wanted to make the point that though we all worry about traffic locally, I think last week the police representative who attended our meeting said most of the roads around are a disaster. So we all worry about that. My specific concern is about traffic in the park and what that does to fundamentally change the park. There are no walking trails that are, unless it's the ones deep in the woods, for for casual use, and those will be where all of the school entry and exit traffic is. So you can debate how many trips that will be, but it's fair to say that there will be hundreds of car trips in and out during the day. I've been paying attention over the last week to see how much traffic is in the park now, and I have to say it's very little during what would be considered to be school hours. That is going to change dramatically. It will change how the park is used and by whom it is used. And I think that point should not be lost in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCauley.
Hi, my name is Heather Hickey. Am I close enough? I'm at 836 Gaylor Drive in Elaine's district. Thank you all for all of your hard work and diligence. I am in support of St. David's moving to the Willows, and the one thing that I want to mention that has been neglected to be spoken about tonight, and I believe someone touched on it from Inverary, about how we as young Radnor Township residents with younger children will one day then live in Inverary. And I also would then look to our children who are the future of Radnor Township. And if we then are succeeding to the Inverary, then these children who hopefully will come to love the Willows and have that be their home and a deep-rooted love, a deep-rooted history, will then bring that forth with them in future years. A love of a place that we all adore and want to keep open and want to preserve. That love and joy that they would bring, I think, is worth mentioning. And I also would like to say that I do drive back and forth by the Willows to take my daughter to St. David's every morning. And I, as well, drive back and forth past the Willows during rush hours to take my older children to their activities. And in rush hour, it is awful. During the times that I take my fourth child to St. David's, there is not a problem there. And furthermore, the area someone spoke about on on South Valley Forge Road, that it can be a little dicey there on that road at drop-off and pickup. I would venture, or I would ask the commissioners then to look at the area in that parking lot. I believe the Inverary resident or president had spoken about how many feet were involved between Darby Paley Road and where the drop-off pickup location would be at Willows. I would also look at that at the current location of St. David's and then compare that, because I don't believe that there will be any cars on Darby Paley Road. That's a personal belief. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Hickey. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Whitney Ebmeyer. I live at 4 Quintero Road in Mr. Curley's ward. I live on the corner of Church Road. It could not be any busier. We could not have more traffic. I understand your traffic concerns completely, and I think we will address that. I'm in favor of St. David's moving to the Willows. We've been at St. David's for 7 years. I have my third child there. I think the only thing that I can bring up that hasn't been brought up before, I think there may be a misunderstanding of the nursery school's impact on the park. These are little kids. They're not outside very long. They get cold. They may take a 10-minute walk. They are not sledding down the hill. It's too big. I think it will be enjoyed. It will be appreciated, but it will not impact the walkers. It won't impact the neighbors' enjoyment of the park. I don't believe that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Altmeyer. Yes, sir. You waiting?
My name is Brooks Oppenheimer. I'm a resident in Donald's, Ward 6 at 250 Highland Avenue. I'm in favor of the school. I'm a parent of a daughter, and currently at the school is having a wonderful experience. And I think that the notion that the private entity is unfairly benefiting from public funds, that you could just as easily make the opposite argument, that the private institution, by injecting that substantial capital investment, would be benefiting the public good because it's going to be used for other uses as well. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Oppenheimer.
Hi, everybody. My name's Noreen Pyatt. I live at 663 Brook Road in Wayne, so I'm Mr. Curley's ward. We consider ourselves, my husband and I, neighbors to the Willows. We're right down the street from it. We're raising our 4 children here in Radnor. We love Radnor. We've been here for 14 years. 3 of our kids are in the public schools, which we love, and our youngest is at St. David's. We love the mansion at the Willows. We love the park at the Willows. My husband, through his involvement with Cub Scouts, has actually helped organize the Great American Campout through the township, which I think has been a big success. We would never advocate for something that we didn't think was a great use of the Willows Mansion and the Willows Park. We've watched for these 4 years as, suitors have come and gone from the Willows. We saw the one arrangement that was entered into and then fell apart. This idea that is a sudden activity that we're trying to find a use for the Willows seems strange to me because we've been reading the mainline Times for these past couple of years or the local news, and we know that you took proposals from caterers and from everybody else that you heard from with their ideas. We're strongly in favor of you guys letting St. David's enter into an agreement with the Willows. We've heard this idea that we don't need to remind anybody how great the St. David's is, and I think that's fantastic. There's this idea that it's known to the commissioners and to everybody that it's a great resource, and I hope that's true. When I hear that, though, I get this sense that there's a thinking that we parents at St. David's, who are also Radnor residents, we must, of course, be in favor of it because we have kids at St. David's, and it feels as if that's a dismissal of our vote. Well, of course we're in favor of it. Our kids are there. And I would just like to point out that St. David's is a preschool. It's not a K through 12. So if anything, our kids will be there for 1, maybe 3 years if we're lucky. We're not here because we think it's a good plan for Radnor Township for 1 to 3 years. We think it's a good long-term plan. The last issue I would just mention is that I've heard this issue of a criticism that we need to give it more time. And again, we've had 4 years to do this, and I don't understand what magic amount of time will make us feel that we have fully considered it. Everybody up there knows, as well as I do, just from living in Radnor Township these 14 years, that you're never going to find a perfect tenant. You're never going to find a perfect use. Some of the uses that I've heard floated seem crazy to me, just as I'm sure ours does to some of the residents we've heard from. But I think that St. David's and this agreement is a reasonable arrangement for Radnor Township. The last issue that I've heard today about Inverary, and again, I live on Brook Road, down the road from Inverary. I'm familiar with the traffic patterns. I agree with the idea of separating that issue because the only use of the Willows that will not increase traffic for Inverary, as far as I can tell, is leaving it empty. I mean, anything you do is going to increase traffic to the Willows, no matter whether it's St. David's or anything else. So I think we should separate those two issues because I don't see how that becomes our burden simply because of the way that it's all situated. I hope that you'll consider St. David's proposal reasonably. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Duffy. I live at 468 Inverary. I was pleased to hear the term due diligence tonight because some of us were misinformed that a decision tonight was being made to go ahead and negotiate a lease. I've personally watched Villanova the deal at Villanova be scrutinized and really made a better deal as a result of the scrutiny. The township takes this kind of analysis very careful, and it felt like we were moving very quickly. I know that the school needs to find a home, and so something needs to be done quickly. But there are environmental impacts, there are legal impacts, there are serious impacts that have to be studied and don't get done in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. This may be a great idea, but it did not feel like it was being studied completely and thoroughly to understand those. So I'm glad to hear there's due diligence happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Okay.
Try to be short. I think a lot of people have my name, first of all, good evening. My name is Charlie Pilkington. I live at 900 Parks Run Lane.
backs up almost to the Willows. And I'd like to just speak on two things. Traffic in this township, as we all know, is an issue. It's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. We're developing land left and right. This is a perfect asset to revitalize. I mean, I think if we could collaboratively work together jointly, people opposed and people in support. I'm in support of it. I had 3 kids who went there 20 years ago, 18, 20 years ago. It's a great institution, but we're not really here to talk about the institution. We're here to talk about the use of the Willows Mansion. Traffic is an issue. That's always going to be an issue. It's only going to get worse. I try to run along Newtown Road. I've been almost hit three or four times. That's my fault, but that's a different issue. I think another issue that we should also try to talk about is revitalizing a great asset in the township here. Reusing it, trying to come up with a collaborative approach that we all work together on that would make sense. So, I mean, I think this is a great start. Hopefully it will lead to other conversations, but you've had 4 years to figure it out, and you've done a great job embedding the process, but you haven't come up with any solutions. And in my opinion, this is one of the best solutions so far. Another thing, just to close here, maybe we should shorten the lease term. Maybe a 15, 18-year lease is too long. I work in real estate. Maybe you do a 5-year lease with an option to renew. If you feel like there are issues after that, you can always terminate and tell them they don't have a place to be. But I think you really have to vet this out and do it quickly and do it in the appropriate manner. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Pilkington, thank you. Hello.
Hello. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm a Radnor resident. I live on County Line Road. And I feel your pain. I've been rear-ended pulling into my own driveway. So traffic is a concern all over Radnor. But the one thing that I really wanted to come up and say, and there's a few things here, but my background is commercial interior design. And the reason why my husband and I chose to come and live in Radnor, we've been here for about 10 years now, is because it is such a great community. And I think community is a really strong word here in what we're talking about. But going back to my background, I was recently watching a continuing education module for corporate interior design and architecture. And Lisa Fulford-Roy, she's the senior vice president at HOK, which is one of the largest architectural firms internationally. And they were talking about market trends and how it's completely changing the dynamic of the last 50 years in architecture and design, and that they're really bringing the human into the environment. And parks are part of our environment and part of our community, and I can't think of a better way to really bring the township into this community. And I think in agreement with all, I'm in favor of St. David's, and in agreement with all the other wonderful things they said about the school and the institution and uniting nature and the students, I really see an opportunity for the children of the community to even maybe support some of Sarah's the farming community that they're supporting there, and all the groceries and growing vegetables. I think that could be a really neat union in the community. But I also see a lot that St. David's offers to the community as working parents and all of their flexible schedules. And parents really have an opportunity to have their children in a great environment and have that staggered drop-off and pick-up, and their kids can stay until 3:30 and not have to have a nanny come in at 11:45. There's some really added benefits there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think that does it. Did Sandy want to say something more?
At least one more
Come on,
over
folks,
here.
come up. Come on, we got, don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Line up. Line up.
Anybody else, just line up behind him so we can get through this, please.
My name is Richard Hudak. I live at 10 Radnor Way, which is in Mr. Booker's Ward 2. I've been at a couple different meetings, not particularly your meetings, but I kind of know how these things go, and they get a little long-winded, and I apologize. I'm not going to try to reiterate anything anybody else said, and I'm going to try to get some new points, kind of a new look on things. I live in a home that's over 100 years old. I moved to Radnor, and I've lived up and down the main line. I grew up in Malvern myself, went to Great Valley High School, but I moved to Radnor because of these homes. And my street is a listing of 10 homes, all over 100 years old. I believe that's beautiful. My wife believes the same thing, and I think all my neighbors believe the same thing. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in this room today would do the same, agree with me the same way, that these properties can never be rebuilt the way they were built back then. There's a property on the Willows, or in the Willows, that is just that. The idea of tearing it down, to me, is the furthest from what we need to do. We need to keep these properties. And the benefit to the community is actually getting it renovated for free. I mean, I'm a taxpayer and pay big taxes here. Everyone does. And we're getting something for free. Obviously, I'm supportive of this because I have one, I didn't tell you this, but I have one of my children goes to the school right now, and another one is going to go there when she is of age. But purely the business sense, and I work at a car dealership, and I run a service industry, in there. And the way that I was impressed when I first went, I don't drop my kids off very often. I had a chance to do that last week, 2 weeks ago. And the way that they do their processes as far as getting people in and out and quickly, I took notes. I need my staff to do it the way they do it there. It's amazing what I saw. They have a tried and true method that they've done forever. I don't know how many years they've been in location currently, but the way that they get everyone in and out so quickly and so efficiently, you have to see it for yourself. But they're going to bring that same method exactly wherever they go, whether it be the Willows Mansion or whatever place they go to eventually, because they will find a home. They're going to bring that same method, and it's a proven system, and they will do that wherever they go. But just purely business, Radnor is going to benefit because of income, because of a property that's falling down, from my understanding, and it's going to get built back up again. And yes, there's going to be some usage. I don't know what percentage. I know we talked about 25 or 3 or whatever percentage it was to the community to be able to use it at other times too. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hudak.
Absolutely, I wouldn't miss it.
Okay, I'm looking around. I don't see anybody. No, Sandy, do you want to come back? I'm going to make an exception. We don't want to have a lot of back and forth, but
I just wanted to ask if the St. David's Nursery School had other properties they were looking at. Is that something I'm allowed to ask?
Yes, ma'am. What I recall we were told is they have done an exhaustive search, and they don't have anything that meets the criteria that they require for their educational institution.
Okay, my second question is, when would the comprehensive traffic study be done? And who would be paying for that?
Well, Bob, I think you've made it clear that the applicant is going to pay for that.
That's correct, and then we would review that.
Okay, I just didn't know
And
when.
she wants to know when.
My hope would that would be completed if the board would allow us to go through this, that would be completed here over the next several weeks, and then we'd have the opportunity for our traffic engineer to be able to review that and then provide those results to the board as well as to the public prior to that March 14th meeting.
Because that's our issue. It's the safety. It's not the children,
Okay.
obviously.
All right, sure. March 14th is a key date. I think, Bob, you said earlier that
March 7th,
you
we
would
would
try to
like
have it by
the
March
info
7th.
to the
but-
board, and then also
Yeah.
for the community to be able to look at.
Okay. All right. Again, I'd like to thank and compliment everybody for being so courteous and respectful. We've had some sessions here where things were not nice, not pleasant, and I wasn't president then. Elaine Schaefer had to take it, and I feel bad for her. Okay, so I'd like to go.
Tonight, no action then?
Well,
because it sounds like what.
let's-
I don't think we need. If we're waiting for a decision, my sense is we let staff come back to us with the information, and then.
Sure, as long as I think they need to know that we are okay with them doing this fact-finding.
Yes, what
and
Bob presented to me sounds very reasonable.
All right, let's go. Rich, do you want to comment on the situation?
I do want to comment on this. I'm not sure what the procedural stance we're taking here is. So I thought we were talking. I thought we were asking the administration to take action. Now, the administration is doing due diligence, or is it the administration honestly, Bob, you did say quite a lot at the beginning, so can you give me a couple bullet points of what you're going to do?
I think we're continuing to do our due diligence, which is evaluating the impact of the park and current, environmental, traffic circulation within the park, pedestrian access, contract terms, reviewing those. St. David's Nursery School performing the traffic study work, establishing a timeline to complete the proposed improvements, establish a professional services account for staff and the professionals to review their plans, further review the financial terms of the potential agreement, establish a clear and definitive plan for the improvements to be completed to the mansion, sketch plans with the details, provide proof, evidence of the financial resources to complete the project, and then on March 14th, at that time, we would make a presentation of what we have here to the board, and I believe at the same time then we'd have St. David's Nursery School present on their side too of what their findings are.
Well, with all due respect, I think that sounds like we are taking action to do a preliminary approval of this project. That's what it sounds like. I think that as the reality of it is, that if they start and they go down that path, to do the bullet points that Bob just laid out there, that will be a decision will be, in fact, made one way or the other. I think so. Oh, Rich, that's wrong. That's wrong. Okay. The issue here is not whether it's a good idea for a nursery school to be there. I think any nursery school would be great there, right? Of course it would. The issue is the public property and what is the use that can be made of that public property legally. In my ward, we had a very similar issue with Memorial Park out over here by Carroll High School. And we put in the field there, and that was done by Agnes Irwin. And a lot of people a lot of my constituents were very much against that. And they filed suit, as a matter of fact, to stop the private use of public properties. So it tells you that people feel strongly about that, and it's a legitimate issue. The public property, is this a good use for it? And not only is it a good use, is it an appropriate use? So I think that that's the main issue, not whether the school would be good there, and I don't think that anyone disagrees that it's a nice place for a school, but is it compatible, and is it something we can approve? And I'm still very much struggling with the rationale for taking public resources and delivering it to any private entity, no matter how good a cause that private entity has.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to address Rich's issue. Basically, we're not in any kind of preliminary agreement. This is due diligence of what this would call. There's going to be no lease agreement that will be in front of the board, so there'll be nothing in which the board will be made aware of, in which you'll be asking to approve anything. This will be just basically all the information. There have been a lot of questions that have been asked. We will look to provide a lot of answers to what residents have asked for. So there'll be a lot of information that'll be presented to the board, so there'll be no lease agreement for you to vote on. Basically, here's a lot of the information, the questions have been asked. So at that point in time, you will then give further direction of where you want to go to. So that will be what our information we're going to provide to the board. That's it, no more, no less. And then to the one question in regards to the lawsuit that we were sued on, basically those folks lost on those cases. And what the township did is looked at enter into a public-private partnership where the taxpayers did not have to pay over $1 million to improve an awful field that we couldn't even play on. So to me, I think the wave of the future is use less taxpayers' dollars and where we can partner with folks to reduce the amount of impact of taxpayers' dollars to improve, where at the end of the day, that's what we should at least pursue, and then the board can make that decision. of whether or not this is a good deal or a bad deal. And this is one where at least all the information should be put out there so that residents, the community, the commissioners have all the information, and you can decide one way or the other. Is this a good decision or is this a bad decision? And then you can weigh and judge that. The board can judge based on all the information.
Bob, that's fine. If we're going to do due diligence, then I think you have a lot more specificity than a preliminary review of potential uses is there. Financing, specific proof of financial resources, review of lease terms. That sounds further than what you're talking about.
Well, I don't think so.
It's been suggested that we don't get into a rebuttal and surrebuttal here with our manager. So I'm going to ask any other commissioner to make a statement, bearing in mind that I think the framework that's been established is what the township manager outlined.
Jim, I agree with you saying. First, thanks for everyone for coming out. I think this is a good example of public discourse, and that was great. And we have to be here, you don't, but we're glad that you're here, and I'm sure we'll see you again. Jim, I think that what you're asking for is strictly what both parties have asked, both sides, which is to get to the facts, period.
Yeah, I agree with Phil. Thank you for coming out. This has been really good. I've learned a lot about the school and about Inverary that I didn't know, so I appreciate that. The way I look at it is I don't think we're approving anything. I think we're moving forward with the direction and doing some due diligence. There's clearly a lot of support for this idea. There's opposition, but CARFAC and Parks and Rec have both recommended this on. So in my opinion, I think everything Bob said makes sense, and we should at least look at it. It doesn't mean it's going to work out. I mean, logically speaking, we had 2 caterers that couldn't get a deal done. There's going to be a lot more in this proposal. So I don't know what's going to happen. That's for administration and the school to work out. But I think we at least should look into it because between emails, again, these advisory boards, everyone who's here, there's clearly support for this. So, you know, let's give it a look. I think Bob's been reasonable when he said.
All right. Any other commissioners?
I'm fully supportive of staff's recommendation to vet this out for another few weeks. There are some very, very, very legitimate concerns that have been raised, and they need to be addressed before we move forward. So I think everyone in this room agrees with that. I do want to take a few minutes just to check in with where my thinking is, because a couple points came up tonight where residents asked questions, well, what is the point of this? Why would we? And I want to just share my thinking on what the point of moving forward would be if we decide to do it. And basically the underpinning of that is the desire to keep this mansion. I mean, that is what's driving this whole train. And for 5 years ago, we decided we really wanted to keep this mansion. And in my opinion, the value of keeping that mansion is tremendous. Now, I understand that's not everybody agrees with that, and I completely respect that not everybody agrees with that. But I want to explain why, to people like me, this is a tremendously important keep. You know, Radnor is it's an extraordinary community. It's not good or great. A lot of communities are good and great. They have great schools, they have great roads, they have great plowing. Well, we have the best plowing, but they have great garbage. But we have the X factor here, and not that many communities have that X factor. And what that stems from is this incredible sense of community, of community self-awareness and a communal sense of our history and a pride about our history and where we've come from. And we have worked hard in this township in all our comprehensive planning to maintain that pride and to hold on to that history. It's a very unique history, you know, the mystique of the main line and how this place was settled and what still exists here. And a home like a historic home like the Willows, it's not valuable in terms of, the vintage style of the trimmings on the house. It represents an era, a bygone era that we can all feel proud of and part of, and we do all feel part of. It's built in the turn of the century from the movers and shakers in Philadelphia that wanted their country home. That's how a lot of these homes were, most of our homes, our older homes, were developed. Then 10 years later, it was gifted as a wedding gift to a daughter, which, that doesn't happen anymore. That's a really cool aspect of our history, and I think people really can communally relate to that. It's part of the fabric of this community, and as I said, it's sort of like the X factor that makes this such an amazing place to live. And yes, there are other old homes. There's Portledge, amazing. Laurier, amazing. Ardrossan, need you say more? But guess what? They're all hidden behind subdivisions. This is this incredible display of our history that reminds us every day, wow, we have this cool past here, and we all share it. So, in my opinion, it would be a crying, terrible, horrible shame to tear it down. And this whole exercise has been a desperate attempt to keep it without us having to pay for it, to find a use that's compatible so that we can keep this and not have the taxpayers pay for it. It's expensive. This proposal that's come before us, it has its pros and cons. It definitely does. And we have to go and really understand, all of us, the whole community has to understand those pros and those cons and weigh them. To me, the pros, saving that mansion, having it loved, lived in, and here in 100 years, that's a huge pro. And not paying for it, huge pro. Secondly, us still having use of it. We haven't really gone into that tonight, but we're still going to have use of that building every evening, every weekend, a month and a half, 2 months of the summer. And those are the most heavily, weekends are when we use that part the most. And I know there will be no more weddings there, but every use I've ever had of that place in 10 years, 15 years, has been short of a wedding. PTA meetings, yearbook signings, coaches, cocktail parties, pancake breakfast for the baseball team, that is all still going to happen there. Santa, sitting on Santa's lap at Christmas time, all still going to happen there. And that's all for free in a newly maintained bit. So those are some pretty good big pros. Cons, traffic is a huge concern. And guess what? It's pretty easily addressed. It's a pretty easy engineering study, so we'll get an answer to that. For me, the biggest and most questionable con is the interruption of the tranquility of that park. I get that, and I'm really sensitive to that. I use that park 3 times a week. Anybody who uses those trails sees me there, so I'm telling the truth. And I do think that is a concern. That I'm not convinced it's a deal killer. There are 100 acres behind that mansion of trails, and they will be untouched by this. There is 71 acres next to it that we just purchased, which we are going to be putting trails in. We've already passed the bond for it. We're going to be putting trails into that, walking trails, macadam, some of them, all in the 71 acres next to it. So we'll still have that. And I compare it to Harford Park, where we have a mansion, Kreuzberg, and we have a dog park. And that park has hundreds of cars going in and out every day because of the use of the mansion. And I've never heard anyone complain about the cars ruining the park. It's still a beautiful park that's heavily used. So in the end, this is going to be a hard decision for us to make. I'm completely sensitive to the things that have been brought up, and we're going to vet every one of them out and make sure that we've touched everything. But it's a decision that, in my mind, is driven by preserving that piece of history that we have and not letting it crumble or taking it down.
Thank you, Elaine. Don?
Sure. So also, like the fellow commissioners, thank you for coming out. Also, thank you for the civility. It's been remarkable, as Jim said, that we can come and have this kind of exchange. So thank you for that. And I promise I will filter out the noise as best I can. So you asked that we do that, and I promise you that I will do my best to filter out the noise. So my thoughts, just like Elaine, I want to give you my perspective from my decision making. So everybody loves the mansion, everybody loves the park, everybody loves the cash, and everybody loves the nursery school. We just value the variables differently. So some of us see the nursery school there as compromising the park too much. And that's the issue that we have to decide that's before us. I do want to push back a little bit against this tonight became a little bit St. David's Nursery School versus Invery. And I can promise you that's the filtering part that I'm doing, because this has never been St. David's versus Invery for me, which is what led me to, why I think this is a mistake for Radnor, is because I am absolutely convinced it's going to be good for St. David's Nursery School. I'm reasonably convinced it's going to be problematic for Invery, but that's a part of my decision making, but a small part. For me, I believe it's going to be problematic for Radnor, because the same way Elaine spoke passionately about the history of the building, I feel that it's the park that does that for us much more than the building. So I believe that we're compromising the park too much to have this proposal. And then I also believe that St. David's Nursery School will be a success wherever they go. So, and I don't know that the park will continue to be a success if we open it up to this level of commercial activity. So I'm going to outline what I'm going to call my lesser issues. All of them combined don't carry the same weight as what I'm going to outline as my premier issue. So the traffic will be an issue, but the traffic is always an issue. And I would urge you not to hang your hat on the traffic, because you've got 8,300 and now you're going to have 8,460, and that's not really, that's going to have a marginal impact, but that's not the issue. It's the 160 in the park itself that is the traffic issue, not the extra 160 that is on Darby Paley Road. I'm not going to get carried away in zoning, because we get to zone whatever we want. So it doesn't matter how we zoned it, but we use it as a park, not as a school. And so it's the concept of zoning. It's the concept that part of the community is not a commercial part of the community. It's parks and residences, and now we're changing that, so that's a bit problematic. The cash, I'm not motivated enough by the cash. The $45,000 is not enough to me to compromise the park. I also want to push back against this idea that we don't have enough cash to do this, meaning we were a $26 million operation in 2009. We're roughly a $40 million operation. I think tonight that's 3 funds. I think tonight we're going to probably become a $42 million operation in 2015. We borrowed $18 million in 14 months. So the issue isn't we don't have enough cash. The issue is the building isn't enough of a priority. And if the building is the priority we say it is, then invest the cash in the building. But push back against the idea that there's not enough cash. We did talk about the term sheet. It's unclear that the use will be beneficial to the township, so that's one of the items that Bob's going to resolve. I see inconsistency with our open space policy. We spent upwards of $9 million to purchase open space across the street, and now we're taking this open space that we already own and we're converting it into a commercial facility. I see that as inconsistent. I also see inconsistency with our past public-private partnerships. Agnes Irwin Field, I voted for that. That was quite controversial. Same philosophical argument. I voted for it because it was a park, and we went into a partnership that made it a better park. Its use stayed as park. We did not change its use. The Scout Cabin, which I've supported through its current pass through the board, and I anticipate supporting it. Similar. It's our goal. One of our goals when we purchase open space is to take land out of circulation. And now we're entering into an agreement with the Boy Scouts, who will take land out of circulation for us. I don't see this agreement as supporting the mission of parks, which is why I'm hesitant to support it. There is that philosophical argument we talked about, but I'm not an ideologue that's going to make my decision solely on that philosophical argument. It's the way that philosophical argument unfolds and the impact that it has. I got a few more. I'll hold off on them. I'll just get into what I'm calling the big reason, which is it's the park. The park is the real benefit. When we purchased open space, the $9 million that we spent, one of the things that Commissioner Spengler kept saying was they don't make any more land. So to me, it's the big reason is the compromise in the park, and I believe that's the debate that we should be having. That's the way we should frame this, not Invery versus St. David's Nursery School. So alternatives, no action is an alternative. I know that stinks, but that is an alternative. We had Rick Leonardi presented an option that showed a rendering of it in a Chanticleer fashion. That's an option. Cass Holloway presented a proposal that would do more to save the building than this proposal would. I'm not supportive of that because I don't value the building enough to engage that proposal. But if you value the building, if you want to preserve the building, Cass Holloway's proposal is a much better way to preserve the building than this proposal is. And then lastly is we can choose to put the cash in. We borrowed $18 million. We borrowed $8 million plus or minus in the fall, dedicated to capital projects for things like this. We could take some of that cash and we could use that cash. We'd have to, again, it's priorities. If this is a priority for us, we can spend money on it. So in conclusion, I see, at this point, I see uncertain and marginal benefit. I see certain and marginal consequences. And I just don't see enough in this for Radnor. So, I'm going to listen attentively to what the township provides us. But at this point, I don't see myself willing to compromise the park at the expense of the building. So thank you.
To me, there are two questions you ask yourself when you first look at this. The first one is, how much do you value the mansion? Is that mansion important to the character of Radnor Township? The second question you ask is, okay, how are we going to preserve it if you answer yes to that first question? Are you going to spend township funds and increase taxes to do that, or are you going to look for a public-private partnership that will accomplish the same goal? Then I went through a lot of issues were identified. I personally think they can all be solved. The traffic, no, because that is a problem in the whole township. I live on Bryn Mawr Avenue, friends. You want to see traffic, come visit me. But all the problems, all the issues that were raised inside the park, I think we can address. And contrary to what Don said about losing open space is not affected by this proposal. In fact, we're gaining space back because right now the mansion's boarded up and we're going to gain the use of the first floor of that mansion again. It's, to me, although I talked about the money at the beginning, that is not the motivation. The motivation is for me is preserving the mansion at minimal cost to our citizens and minimal impact to the park itself. I've been involved with the park since the mid-'80s. I've walked in this park more times than I can imagine. And by the way, there is a trail in the park. It goes from the driveway just past the entrance there, the cottage, and goes across and comes out on the other side. However, some people talked about speeding. We can do speed bumps. Perhaps what we have to do is maybe we have to add a trail or a widening of the road to give a place for the joggers and the walkers. I've never been in that park, at least before the bridge fell down, when there wasn't a constant stream of cars going through there. So much so, I was surprised at the number of tradesmen who would come in to use the porta potties. You know, it's an observed behavior. So to me, it was not that disturbing, personally. And I'm not going to say it isn't to you. Anyway, I think we can address all those. We're talking about I call it the loop. It's the in to out driveway. The part of the driveway that goes off to the parking lot and up to the mansion is going to be 2 lanes. And So the issues that were raised about that, I don't feel are valid. Anyway, I think it's a real win-win for the community as a whole. And as I mentioned, I've already asked for traffic to get involved in the issues in front of Inverary, because it is bad. Thank you. And Jim, I would like to recommend when we wrap this up, we take a couple minutes so folks want to leave.
All right, I'm going to take my own advice and not repeat anything that anybody else has said. I have one criterion for this whole process, and that is I want to do what's in the best interest of the township. If this is a good deal economically, that's one factor. If it's a bad deal environmentally, that's a factor. Second, I said one criterion, but there's another one too. I want to make sure that the people that oppose this are adequately heard and considered. I think that's important. Just because I'm elected doesn't mean I can dictate what happens and how the process unfolds. So I want to make sure that the people that don't like this idea are heard and heard sufficiently well. And I appreciate all of you being, as I said, very respectful. Lastly, I want to make sure that, well, two things. The traffic has to be analyzed. We have to have that study. That has to go into our thinking. And we have to make sure that there is legality behind this partnership. We can't be doing something that contravenes state law or our own charter or our own municipal code. So that's, I think, about it. And I appreciate everybody coming and your comments. And we will have another discussion on this, I'm sure, at our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight. And then, as Bob has said, we're going to be, and March 14th, we're going to be looking for more information then.
Right, so we won't have a conversation on this at our next meeting.
There's nothing to prevent anybody from discussing it. I think we're going to need more time. They're going to need more time to get the data for us, however. Okay, I'm going to ask that we have a recess now for about 3 minutes so the room can empty and people can relax a little bit.
You can all stay for the rest of this meeting. You don't have to leave. Good here.
All right, thank you. We're back in session, and we are at a point on the agenda where it's Public Works and Engineering, and that comes to me. And we have tonight an ordinance 2016-03, and this is to amend our stormwater, amend our capital budget to accommodate the stormwater fund or stormwater budget. And we have with us tonight the chair of our Stormwater Advisory Committee, Paige Maz, and the vice chair, Paul Bergmere. And I think we're ready to hear from you, unless Steve Norsini wants to say anything, but I don't see him anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Zinkowski had him leave because he has to mobilize his forces because of the snow.
Okay.
It just started very lightly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay, Paul. What do you need? Oh, Jim Doling, can you illuminate the world here?
There we go. All right, so I'm here to present our idea of the budget for the stormwater fund, and in terms of how we think spending should go. And specifically, we're asking for some indication of approval for these, what we'll call percentage goals in 4 different categories. And I'll go through this in a second. And then we're going to propose a process for how we think it might be good to move forward with future spending. This particular budget is odd in the sense that we don't know what we're doing yet. We know that we're moving in a particular direction. We know that we're doing assessments and that repairs will be coming up, but we don't know specifically what we're spending going beyond, say, 2016, maybe 2017. So what we're asking is for you to take a look at actually 2019. We'll talk a little bit about the stuff in 16 and 17 in a little bit, but really what we'd like to see is this goal of spending, say, $200,000 a year in repairs, maintenance, and MS4 spending, 67% or $670,000 for capital improvements, around $80,000 a year for administration and general engineering, and then $50,000 or 5% of the spending in rebates, credits, grants, incentives, whatever. So that's our goal. And you can see that, whoops. That's where we went ahead. And the problem with the kind of the intermediate years is that there has been spending approved by the Board of Commissioners that carries through into future years, and that's reflected in the numbers that are presented for 16 and 17. So again, here's the goals that we're looking for. Why these particular percentages? And again, we're trying to define a process here in a way. We believe capital improvements are the primary function of the stormwater fee, is to provide those solutions to flooding. And so we think the bulk of the money should go to capital improvements. That said, there are needs for repair and maintenance, and when we look at the ordinance, we see the word maintain, which seems to include repair as part of it. We chose 20%. It is an arbitrary number, but it seemed like a reasonable place to be with those numbers. We want this 5% for the rebates and credits. Right now, our rebates are way below that in terms of the amount of money that we're actually putting out. But as we get the incentives program going on, then we should have spending there. And our rationale for going there is, one, it does involve the public in a more process and in a more active way. And then we're hoping that the ODP credits can be useful in larger flood mitigation projects as we go forward. And then finally, the engineering and administration, really, we describe that as the lubricant that keeps this process going. If we didn't have Dan doing his thing, we would really be stuck in the mud. So it's a necessary expense. So just to kind of go through 16 and 17 so you have a better sense of what the spending is, these projects that are now outlined in green are projects that were approved by the Board of Commissioners previously And what we've done is taken those numbers and said, okay, assuming that they're going to go forward in time, that you'll approve the rest of the spending, this is what we expect to have happen. So there's a fair bit of repair work that's been previously approved to the tune of about $657,000. There are also some capital projects, the North Wayne Station, money which comes from this next 100,000 is coming from SEPTA here, and that's just listed down here. Middle school connection to the current stormwater system is 150,000. The Banbury Francis Way that was approved in December, we spread that over 2 years. And then the township-wide assessment, which is happening as we speak, for $275,000. We also have a fixed cost, shall we say. This is the process of televised inspection of all the stormwaters in the system. We're doing $50,000 a year. Nothing happened last year, so we're going to do $100,000 this year and then move this forward. This is actually necessary in part to do the township-wide assessment, because we need to know what's under the ground as far as pipes, et cetera, to do a good modeling package. And then the last part is these two fixed costs that we have here. So again, that's the what's happening in 16 and 17. So what we'd like to propose going forward, and again, we're looking for your input on this, anything that is new capital or repair projects that come before you, we add them to the spreadsheet so you can see how that's impacting this goal of 20%, 67%, et cetera. And that would include what we expect to be the future costs if you approved it going all the way through. Not that it's been approved, but that we'd carry the cost through so you can see the impact in the outlying years. And so you can see all that. And then that prioritization becomes part of the approval process. You can see the impact of that and whether or not you want to go outside the limits, or if you want to try to figure out where else money might come from. From a capital perspective, we think that the engineering assessment that Dan is currently doing is going to move us in the direction of this prioritization. We're discussing that later this week, the first part of that. And looking back, the Banbury Francis Way was a good example of how we'd like to do that prioritization in terms of, Don talked about sensitivity analysis and seeing what the impact on the downstream is happening. From a repair process projects standpoint, we're starting discussions on prioritizing repair projects. We were focused pretty heavily on capital projects up until now. Now that that's more or less moving along, we want to talk about, okay, so there's a bunch of repair projects that are there. It's a lot of money in the pipeline. How do we control that cost? Or how do we deal with that cost? And how do we prioritize what needs to be done? So again, coming back to what we're asking for is some sense of your feeling about the percentage goals, and then some sense about the process that we're proposing for going forward. So that's what I have. Questions?
Just want our feedback on it then?
Sure, go.
Sure. Okay, so my sense of those numbers, they seem kind of reasonable. Initially, when we presented this idea, I would have wanted the capital number to be much larger. Mm-hmm. But as compromise, 20% meets much of the spirit of what I had been asking for. So my gut tells me that that's going to be a winner with the board. The other numbers seem reasonable, the 8%, the 5%. And then as far as the process, did I hear you correctly then that essentially what we would get is every fall we would get to approve projects, meaning you would come to us with a budget that's outlined like this, and that there would be 6 or 7 projects on it, there would be an amount of money, and we would pick those projects for the next year, recognizing that some of them could extend beyond a year.
I mean, if that's the way you'd like to proceed, we'd be happy to do that. The way it had been going was that as specific projects came up, we'd come to you for approval.
Right. That's the part that I think we have to invert. I think what we have to do is come up with, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or 1 year. We have to say, here, we have $1 million a year for the next 3 years. Here are 7 projects that we're going to do. And then somebody says, well, what about this? This is a great project. And the answer is, maybe we'll get to it in year 4. But we need to approve every project in the context of the other projects that we approved and in the context of the projects that we didn't approve, the known projects that we didn't approve. And essentially, that's how what we are doing now is kind of piecemealing it. We're getting one, and we can't evaluate whether that's a valuable project because we're not seeing it in the context of other projects.
So if I could just ask back, so from a repair perspective, would that be different? I mean, if there's a repair that needs to be done, or again, we're just trying to flesh this out ourselves.
Right. So my reaction is, there's a repair process. You do it out of the repair budget. You don't do it out of this. And if you have to tap into this, then it's coming at the expense of some other project.
Okay.
So the maintenance and repair is probably going to be a little more obvious. You know, the prioritization of that, because a lot of it's really a question of what needs to be done right now. That has been how it's come up. We have all these emergencies, culverts collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
The capital is a little bit more dicey, but we have this built-in control system in that we only have $670,000 a year, which is not that much. It's like half a project, if that. So the pipeline is going to move slowly because there's just not the money to load up on projects. In fact, the pipeline is kind of full right now because of there's just not that much money. So the fact that we're not going to have the full township study, that there will be a prioritization process, we have time because there's no money right now. We've spent the $670 for this year and next year. So I think we shouldn't worry too much about how that prioritization is going to go because the money is spent for right now. I do have a question that isn't on process, and I completely support that breakdown. I think that's very reasonable. What North Wayne Station? What is that? That's something separate and apart from the work that we were anticipating at North Wayne Field. Is that the Amtrak
North
work?
Wayne Station is the joint project with SEPTA.
With SEPTA,
that they were going to give us. So if you look at 2017, the stormwater fee is $100,000 more. That's because SEPTA is supposed to contribute that $100,000, and then we spend that money, and we contribute some amount in terms of planning or something specific like that, right, Jim?
Yeah, engineering. I think.
Yeah.
When do we anticipate doing that project?
Well, I mean, if Steve were here, he could tell you more. I don't have the details of that.
All right.
So I guess my comment on that would be, that means that the Poplar Avenue flooding situation is just going to go back into the hopper with all the other projects at this point and get prioritized with this full township study.
That's really up to you guys. I mean, right now, the way it stands is we're putting it into the township-wide assessment to give it the same kind of assessment as we're giving other projects. We don't know how that's going to work out, so I can't tell you right now. If it turns out to be useful, then I think we'd say go ahead. And if it turns out to be not useful, our recommendation maybe would be not to go forward.
So when is that? When is the township study?
So Dan is finishing up a preliminary assessment, and we're going to discuss that on Thursday.
Okay.
And then it's a big thing, so we're not sure how long it's going to take to kind of pull out all the pieces of that. And I'm sure there'll be iterations as well. We want to do it right if we're going to do it. So.
I guess my input on that, and this is just one commissioner talking, so take it for what it is that situation in that particular area is sort of an emergency, in my mind. I mean, that's why we had addressed it before we were ready to address it, really. And we addressed it before we had even permission to get on the land. I mean, it is the most life-threatening of of our flooding situations. So I get a little worried about it now getting put back into the hopper and now not maybe doing anything about it for 2 more years.
I'll just speak for myself, because we have not spoken about this as a
Right.
committee
Mhm.
for different reasons. I think that you could separate out what is a repair. It
Mhm.
is a failed system,
Uh-huh.
from what would be an upgrade, which is more a capital project.
I
And
see
I'm
what
just
you're saying.
saying, yes, I know, I live close by, I know that it's blown out
Mhm.
and that's a problem, but I'm just not sure, we've mixed two things by making it
I
an
see.
upgrade at the same
Mhm.
time as dealing with a repair, or a broken system. If it were a culvert, we just fixed the culvert and we call it a repair. Here, we're trying to do two things at one time and asking whether or not that amount of money is worth spending that amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm just talking.
The study that CH2M is embarking on or going out for will include an assessment
Yes.
of Gulf Creek.
Yes.
And our other water courses.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So based on the findings of that, we'll make some decisions.
Or we could repair the structure that's there under the repair budget. Mhm.
Okay.
Well, I'm fine with the analysis. Anybody else want to say anything?
I just have a question. Thank you for the analysis. I think
Sure.
it's smart planning, and thank you for the work you've done so far this year and in previous years, both of you.
Thank you.
The question I have is, as I look at going forward to 2019 and beyond, I see that you have a little different numbers here, but it's somewhere in the order of $400,000 seems to be your balance at the end of the year in a planned sort of a way. Is that right? So does that tend to? Oh, I see. Right now you're down to 19. You're down to 284,000. Is that it? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's a plan.
We just left a little slush.
Right.
Who knows?
Which is great, because my question was really going to be, what do you do if your analysis or your assessments all of a sudden pop up some very serious problems that, that are even beyond repair, that you really need to address this as a capital thing?
What I heard Don talking about was the idea that if you have an emergency, you'd find the funds for it.
Well, I'm talking about a capital. In other words, this is you didn't see it before, so you didn't know it. So now you had a plan. So, in other words, you have
I
some
think
reserve.
we're hoping that the township-wide assessment will avoid that particular issue, and it could be that we're wrong, but that's our hope.
I just wanted to confirm, and it sounds great that you have a reserve in there, that you're not spending every dime, because something will come out.
284,000 is not any reserve.
It's enough to take care of it.
That's not going to buy anything. So I don't really consider that, but I don't think that there's likely to be unforeseen or unknown problems at this point.
Well,
I do want to make the point that there is, an ongoing assessment of stormwater structures in the township. Gannett Flint just finished one. They did 5 culverts. We're going to hear about that on Thursday, and that's planned to go forward so that we have less and less of this emergency stuff happening.
Right. Thank you.
So I just want to understand then what's the ramification of this? Part of it would be a technical question for you, Paul, and part of it would be for Bill. So if we approve it tonight, what it does is it gives the township the authority to proceed with those capital projects that you've identified in 16. So we can start spending money on them, and we can do the repairs that you've identified in 16. And so Bill, right, that's what it'll do. It'll essentially make this money available to do those things in 16.
Yeah, keeping in mind that any contract or project that exceeds the $7,500 will
Comes to
require
us, but
specific board
yes,
approval.
This allows you to initiate these projects, which are right now, they're just concepts, and you would take them from general to particular, and ultimately they would lead to something being built.
But not before coming back in
Yeah, I
front of the
understand,
board for
I understand.
approval. But yes, that's.
And then
that
the
is-
budget itself would just, where we have, there's zero money in this, it would just get populated with the revenue line, and then the expense line would be populated with the sum of these expenses.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to get a sense of the distribution of the expenditures by ward. Do you have any breakdown of that?
I do not.
I'm also not seeing in here, do you talk, I had to step out for a second, so where's the Poplar Ave First Ward issue? Is that on here, or are we saying that that's not on here?
That is not on here. Yes, that is not on here.
And
again, we talked about the fact that we're waiting on the township-wide assessment to see of its impact.
I don't want to parse words, but I would say it's on there. It's in there in the study, correct? Because that's the first step. The first step in that process is essentially the sensitivity analysis of the intervention, and that's what there's $275,000 for that, and that particular question would be resolved by the analysis.
Yes, that's correct.
how much, as a percentage, of the expenditures are for studies and administrative costs?
So the administrative costs are set at 8%. The township-wide assessment is the $275,000, so what would that be? 27%. And again, that's a one-time thing that we see as necessary to move forward, to prioritize anything in the township, to know what's the big flooding areas, how do we impact them?
And essentially, by the time we execute what's in that analysis, we will have collected $4 million. So it's not even 10%. Essentially, we're putting out 8% in order to figure out how we're going to spend $4 million.
Yeah, I don't see it quite that way. I see it as every dollar we've spent in 4 years has been for studies and administration.
Well, there's a lot of repairs. There's Banbury Francis Way. I guess I don't see that, but.
And actually, by the time that we have a capital project that comes out of that, we'll probably be just through the committed capital from Banbury Way and the middle school project. So even if we had that study done right now, and there was some great project that popped right up as a number one, it would have to be kind of year 3 anyway, because we've blown our wad really on other capital projects.
Well, I'm not sure if I'd use that terminology, but my concern with this whole project, this whole program, has always been it's way too costly in the way of studies and administrative expenses, and it's not a fee. We spend it just like tax dollars. This is a tax, and it's not fairly apportioned amongst all the taxpayers. So I disagree with the expenditures. I disagree with the program, and it's clear that this is a tax, and I think that the best thing that we've been able to do so far is that Don's been able to convince the Stormwater Committee to identify priority projects and then identify the most beneficial solution per dollar spent. That's what is the best, but I don't see any of that here. This is a chunk of money, and I think it's an improper delegation to the Stormwater Committee. So this is something that should be decided on by the Board of Commissioners.
But the township-wide study of our water courses is in response to what you just said Don's view is of the whole scheme, the whole problem.
Well, why are we just doing it now when we've been collecting $1 million a year for the last two years then?
Well, mainly because Don wants to see.
It's not a matter of time. It only makes sense.
Objective numbers before we spend any money. And
I think I'd make 2 comments. First of all, with all due respect to Don, the board has been doing this for a year in terms of wanting sensitivity analysis, and we got the funding for the engineer, et cetera, and so it's been moving forward. I absolutely agree with his assessment, and so when he talked about it at the last meeting, we're like, yes, that's exactly what we want as well. The second thing is that Banbury Francis Way, that project came out of spending on a study. We made a good decision because we did a study. If we don't do the study, we can't make good decisions.
The Banbury Francis Way, is that the one by the Wawa?
Yeah, right.
Again, I think that the result of that project is that you've selected the solution that gives the most benefit per dollar spent, which is great. It's just not the highest priority project in the township, which I think it's misdirected in that there's other projects I would put of a higher priority. Nonetheless, it's not a fee, this is a tax. We should treat it as a tax, and this is an improper delegation of authority.
Okay. Okay. I think we've heard from everybody. So I'm going to,
I move the introduction of ordinance 2016-03, approval for stormwater fund capital budget.
all right, is there any further discussion amongst the commissioners?
Yeah, we need the Stormwater Committee needs to identify projects by ward. It's absolutely, it's astounding and it's outrageous that we collect the money from all the different wards and then we spend it where a select few people decide they want to spend it. And there's absolutely no representation in that. So at least you should split it out so we see that the second ward is getting no projects for the money that the second ward puts in. The people should at least be able to see that. So I would ask for that transparency.
Okay, thank you.
If the board wants that, we can do that. I mean, except for the fact that...
This board member wants that.
Let's get this through
but
here.
I do want to, there is, you're rejecting Rich's, but there's some merit, there is merit to some of what he's saying. So a lot of these projects did not have any kind of sensitivity analysis to them, correct? I mean, the big nuggets.
Yeah, the one that we would hold up as the model would be Banbury Francis Way.
So, but there are others in there where it was just a decision was made that this is, and for me, there's an element of compromise in a lot of these things, and I have objections to how we've done this from the beginning, but then I'm also seeing it move in the direction that I believe it needs to move in. So there's enough for me to approve it, but that doesn't mean that, by any means, that I agree with everything that we've done so far, and that there are elements of this that have not had any kind of sensitivity analysis. But I am confident now that when we get to a big nugget, that big nugget is going to have a sensitivity analysis. So I'm going to support it, in part because of compromise and in part because it's moving in the direction that I think it needs to move.
Well, just be aware again, the people, the constituents who are paying the money are not getting any benefit from it. If it was a fee, you pay a water fee and you get water to your house. You pay for a sewer fee, you have a sewer connection, and you pay for the sewer service. Any other type of fee is a direct benefit to the fee payer. This is not a fee, and again, I would ask that you at least make it clear by ward where the expenditures are so that people have that information, and they will be able to then clearly identify it and make their case known to the Board of Commissioners and others. But if you hide it like this, then they don't have that, and then they just have to rely on me to make the point over and over how the second ward is paying the highest dollars in stormwater fee and getting nothing, including some of our developers and others. We get none of this benefit, but we pay more in payments than any other ward.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Thank you. Let's go ahead.
Well, if I may, I just want to give a perspective on this, just my opinion.
Yep.
In 2012, we had a study done by Sugar Valley Engineering that basically laid out where all the areas of flooding impacts were in the township. In my opinion, we could have moved forward because the areas of where we know where the areas flood in Radnor Township. So to go any further with study in that, We know where the areas flood, so we just should have just moved, we could have moved forward at that time and made corrections. That's my opinion.
We agree.
The analysis where dollars are spent by ward, we have a sewer fund where we do sewer repairs in different areas. Those aren't segmented by ward because we have pump stations in certain areas. We have sewer lines that break in certain areas where we have projects for improvements. Same things, we don't segment those by wards to say, well, Ward 1 has sewer lines that break, but you know what? We don't have enough money to fix those this year because we have 2, 3, 4, 5 where we do that. Those are items that, you know, you try to balance because we don't have pump stations in each ward. So it's kind of that differential of where you try to do that at. You try to spread out the best we can, but alls I know too, though, is there's stormwater that's generated in the middle of downtown Wayne that ends up here just outside the Township building that runs through, all the way through, that impact a lot of homes here that may not have problems that sit down in the middle of Wayne, but they sure impact these homes that sit down here. So stormwater is generated that moves through areas that impact other homes. So I think there is an impact to different areas of the township that we have to be aware of and cognizant of, that there are other impacts that are generated.
I just want to say, under the ordinance as it's written, and the theory that I thought was out there, which was the comprehensive approach, right, to figure out where the problems were and then set priorities, I think it's playing out as it should. So thank you for your work. I'm in Ward 3. We're one of the areas that, you know, that are the hardest hit, and we're using up a lot of these funds, and I understand that. The Banbury Francis Way is going to help us out. Obviously, the middle school connection, I think, will help. I'm hoping that's in conjunction with the Banbury Francis Way to kind of alleviate how much water is going through that, if any. So I think it's playing out under the ordinance as it's supposed to. If there are issues with the substantive ordinance, that's something we can get into. But under the ordinance as written, I think it's playing out, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Good. Okay, is there any comment from the audience or from, we don't have our Public Works Director. Bob, we've heard from you. All right, then I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And it passes 6-1. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paige. All right. I think you're still with us because we have the next item is Resolution 2016-16, amending Resolution 2015-58, which is the Stormwater Rebate Program. Paige.
Yes, so when the Stormwater Rebate Program for single-family residences was put into effect this past June, there was some confusion over what the effective date was, and we've had a few applications that predated the June approval of this single-family rebate. We'd like to make that clear when the date is, the start date. We'd like to make that January 1, 2015, and allow us to release those rebates to those individuals who have, and we're just speaking about a handful of rebates.
I see from the memorandum that would have minimal impact on the budget.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that 5% with the rebates.
Okay. Does anybody want to move the introduction of this?
I'll move the introduction of it.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second. Luke, do you want to say anything? No.
Makes sense.
Any
I'm fine with
comments
it.
from up here?
The only question I have is how will you make that public so that people will know that? Or is it just really going to be the folks who have already applied that predated that date?
That's a good question. It certainly will apply to the folks that have already applied, and we can bring that up at our stormwater meeting, since that's a public meeting. We also occasionally will publish small articles, and we did have one a few months back about the rebate program, and we should include that the next time round so the folks know.
Good, that's great. Bob, can we get that on the website a little bit too?
We can do that.
Yeah, give it some prominence in the beginning. Thank you very much.
So we're going to make the change that anyone who has a stormwater rebate project subsequent to January 1, 2015 is eligible?
That's
as opposed to, what was the old date?
It was the date of approval by the board.
Was it June 15th?
2015, yeah.
So it's earlier. So that makes sense to me, and I would, anybody who's watching and the folks, I would encourage everyone to put in an application for a rebate, changing your downspouts, making it, pushing, taking your splash block and turning it into the grass, relocating your downspouts, anything that you can do. I want everyone to file for a rebate and to try to get a little bit of the stormwater fee back for your home. So I encourage everyone to file, and I think that we should also expand it so that people can have whatever stormwater expenditure that they've done on their property should be eligible for a rebate. And I would go before that time. So I think that many people have spent tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on stormwater in their property, and all that money should be eligible for rebate, far more than just the rain barrels and some other things. So I'm supportive of this.
All right. Paige, can we give you a 30-second commercial to list any other rebate-eligible items besides what Rich just mentioned?
Go right ahead.
No, do you? I don't know them. Do you? Can you tell us what they are?
The current ones include rain barrels, rain gardens, downspout disconnections, cisterns. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything else, just following up on on Commissioner Booker's comment?
I think-
Are there any other systems out there that you think could possibly fit the mold of what we're looking for here in terms of diverting stormwater and helping with our issues that homeowners can do?
If a homeowner wants to put in a system that goes above and beyond what is required per ordinance, say if they put on addition to their home and they're required to do that, that's not eligible for a rebate. If someone wants to go ahead and put in an underground detention system at a cost of $10,000, we would certainly entertain that on the application, though I think that might not be cost effective for the
Would you give them back the $10,000?
No, and in fact, the rebate program as it stands doesn't necessarily rebate the entire cost of a rain barrel or a rain garden. It's just a portion of it.
What's the portion that you rebate?
It depends on how much you spent for that particular item.
So how do you measure what the cap is? Is there a cap?
It's listed on the form. There's a cap for each of the different stormwater.
Can you go through that? What is the cap?
I don't have it in front of me. I believe it's
read it, Rich. It's rain barrel up. I'm sorry, Pete.
Go ahead. Just get it out for the people.
Barrel up to $50 each. Rain garden up to $250. Cistern 100. Downspout diversion up to 50.
So it sounds like 250 is the maximum that's what we've authorized. 250.
Correct.
Well, again, I think that should be much higher, but I would recommend to anyone, any homeowner, any project that you do that you think is even marginally part of the stormwater management at your home, that you should file an application and try to get that $250, and I think it's worth the effort. So I would encourage everyone in every household to file a refund request.
Just a comment on the rebate program. The intention of us is to do this for about a year and then reassess. How's it going? How many people are applying? Whether the money should be higher, et cetera. So that is in the works, to look at it and say, okay, how's it going, and can we do it better?
Possible other uses if enough people apply for them or whatever it may be. Okay. All right.
That's the whole point of the program, is to get people to put these things on their houses. So I hope everybody hears this and runs out and goes get their green garden tomorrow, because that is the point.
Agreed.
Or whatever they do on their site. I would recommend that anything you do on your site, you should file for a rebate for the $250.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead now and have our vote. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to say anything? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. All right, we're up to Personnel and Administration, and we have another ordinance, 2016-02. This is introduction, approving the agreement of sale between the Township and Radnor, 240 Radnor Chester Road Investment LP. And this is for property at 240 Radnor Chester Road. And Phil.
I'll make that motion to put this into.
You move it? All
I
right.
move it.
I'll second it.
Good.
And I think I'll ask the solicitor to describe what this is all about.
Okay. Just short background, as the board knows, this is a lot, landlocked parcel that the township acquired in 1955. The deed over the last year was discovered in the archives of the township. We have since recorded the deed in the last 30 days. And last fall, in November, the board determined to sell the lot. It was put out for bid, and bids were returned, I believe, in December. It's a 2,500 square foot lot. The bid was awarded to Radnor Chester Road, 240 Radnor Chester Road Investment LP, subject to an acceptable agreement of sale being prepared. That's what you have in front of you tonight. The elements of the agreement of sale include the compensation for the sale of the lot. It also includes, as attachments to the agreement of sale, which will occur at settlement on the 2,500 square foot lot, deed restrictions on both that lot and then ultimately on an adjacent lot at 14 Radnor Way. There was, I think, at least one public meeting on this. I know there were several residents that were interested in ensuring that commercial encroachment did not encroach into their neighborhood. The agreement of sale has those protections in it. I think Mr. Gross, who's here tonight with Mr. Cornelia, plans to ultimately consolidate all the land, and you will probably see some kind of a project or a new building on his property once that occurs. There is no development that will happen on the 2,500 square foot lot, and he's made a commitment through the agreement of sale to also deed restrict the other land that he owns on Radnor Way. So this is introduction. This will come back to the board probably in 2 weeks. I will point out there's one minor typo in the agreement of sale. In paragraph 4, condition of title, the first line, it references a section 4.1. That should actually be 5.1, which is down below. So with that, as I said, it's up for introduction. The board approves it tonight. It'll be back in front of you in 2 weeks.
Well, that's not one typographical error in, I counted, it's 58 pages, the amount of paper in this proposal.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to this because of the restrictions, and if you've read the restrictions, there was some concern raised during the course of discussion that maybe a future Board of Commissioners could alter the restrictions. So we gave the right to the residents out there to also enforce those restrictions. So you'll see in the two declarations a list of the property owners that will have the right to enforce these restrictions going forward. So I think we've tied this up as best we can. This is an orphan landlocked parcel of ground that the township really has no use for.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, but so back to your other point though, before you leave that, John.
Yeah.
It is listed, all the residents, all the addresses that will have the right to enforce the provisions of this agreement. They will just have to be on notice of that for subsequent owners that they would have this right. In other words, there's nothing that's recorded on those parcels that could remind anyone. It's just going to be part of this agreement that. And isn't it going to be recorded on the new deed that all of those parcels will have the right to enforce?
Right.
But we're not going to go to 2 Radnor Way and make some note at the Recorder of Deeds office that they have the right to enforce, though.
No, but I mean, what we would do, once we go to settlement, it's all recorded, we have timestamp copies of the declarations. I would send copies out to all the residents that are listed on there. But to go to each one and, I mean, you normally wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about when you have an owner like this, an owner, somebody might leave next year, and then somebody might 3 years from now, you could be two owners removed.
Right.
And how would they know if they never, it's going to be tough for them to know, but, so it's just the folks in the neighborhood are just going to have to.
We will send them copies of the restrictions, and then that's the best we can do.
All right, and also, I did want to go through the restrictions on use that we have on page 68 of 87 on my version here. So, letter A, no public pedestrian access and vehicular traffic from the 240 Radnor Chester Road parcel to Radnor Way. So, there'll be no access through that, which was a key to the residents of Radnor Way. Any new parking structure and building lighting will be designed shielding the eastern side to limit spillover to Radnor Way. All future development on the consolidated parcel will be in accordance with current zoning, including setback requirements, building height, coverage. No change in zoning shall be deemed to permit development in addition to what is currently permitted. Upon construction of any additional building, the removal of the current building structures adjacent on Radnor Way or the R1 properties will be, the declarant will cause the removal of those current buildings. So what this is saying is that the letter C, or letter D, the removal of the existing office building that's there, and I guess the other two houses to make the buffer starting from Mr. Hudak's property. So we'll have a large green space between the current property line and the R1, the first house on the R1.
Next paragraph references, we had a plan that was done by Mayfield Gardens, which is of file here. So we have a reference of that large plan with the buffer and what was proposed to be planted. So there's at least some conceptual idea, but the ultimate planning will probably be back in front of this board. If there's a land development plan and this becomes part of that,
right, so
you're going to see that back.
And in that, any new plan would be a new tree buffer on the easternmost boundary that will include planting of 35 Norway spruce trees with a 25-foot height, and consistent with that landscaping plan that you referenced right there by Mayfield Gardens. And that's also incorporated into the agreement. And then finally, provide and maintain the cul-de-sac, and there's a turn space at the end of that Radnor Way, so that will also be maintained by Mr. Gross. So, as you said, John, I think we tied this up about as good as you could possibly do.
And you're going to have a land development plan back in front of you, so you'll see the details. I don't know when.
And we would say that they can take their time as long as they want. There's certainly no rush. There's certainly no rush, but I think that it's very rare to get so much specific documentation from a developer on what that they propose to do. So I think
Mr. Gross has been very cooperative. You have a traffic signal easement that you were also acquiring. Traffic signal's already there, so there's been a lot of give and take with this. It's taken a few months, but there's been a lot of moving parts. This protects the residents.
And we have an excellent solicitor who negotiated a very good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the commissioner of Second Ward also helped a little bit with that. But we'll also say
you were against this 3 months ago.
Yeah, I think I'm still am
going to vote against it.
I still am against this. It's true, but that's how you get the best deal. right? That's what this board needs to do a little bit better job of understanding how you negotiate and get the best deal. You don't just cave on the first offer. But nonetheless, there are severe concerns about this, and I've made them before. I think that this will ultimately increase the size of any building that's there, and I am concerned that this was not an orphan parcel, John. This parcel was a buffer parcel intended to preserve the 100-year-old homes on Radnor Way. Radnor Way is a small enclave between commercial development as well as, it's not residential, it's residential enclave between commercial and planned laboratory office zoning and the railway station. So it's a very unique area that is really only known to the people who live there and the people in my neighborhood. But it is, that parcel was there to preserve and to ensure that there is a buffer between the commercial development and Radnor Way and to ensure that that doesn't encroach. I think this preserves some components of that. Nonetheless, I am concerned that we make sure we get all of this that's promised and that we also are able to preserve that neighborhood, which has been there for some time and which the people certainly enjoy.
Okay, I think we have...
So,
Two quick
I would...
questions. I'm sorry.
you want
Rich, are
Can
you
you
going
wind
to...
up, Rich? We ready? Don wants to speak.
Yeah, so everything in this is as we discussed. All the lines are where you showed us they would be, all the agreements. So yes, it is. That's correct. Good. And then when we there was a minimum amount that we accepted for it, right? We put that in. My understanding is that we set a minimum.
For the bid?
It was
It's 50,000.
Yeah, it was 50,000. The way it was bid out, it could be cash or land or a combination of both. So
Right, but
what
we had it assessed, and then the minimum. So we are getting the fair value of the land based upon the process that we used.
The appraisal was 50,000. You're
Yes.
getting $50,100.
Great, thank you.
In value back.
Okay, we ready to vote? Or anybody in the audience want to comment? We have the developer here, but I don't think it's necessary for him to come up. So I think I've seconded it, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And it passes 6-1. Okay, and we are now at public safety with John Nagel.
That's me. I have no report unless
Oh.
superintendent has, nope, no report.
John Nagel is not public safety. Okay. Community Development, Don Curley.
Nothing to report.
Finance and Audit, Phil.
Nothing to report.
Okay.
About that Carfax meeting you guys had. We had that meeting, right? I had a conflict that night.
Yes, we did have a meeting, and they will issue their minimum.
You don't want to say anything about the meeting? I'd like to hear what happened.
Well, there was a meeting at the Carfax, and 6 commissioners were there. I think Don came a little bit late, but we were all there.
Wait, are you allowed to have 6 commissioners there? Was that a public meeting?
Yes.
So was there any agency actions taken?
None to take at a Carfax meeting.
And nobody wants to provide any summary for the public? Just going to say, oh, we had a meeting? That's it, huh? Nice.
No, there were minutes published in your.
Well, why don't you just highlight? You want to highlight anything at all? Why are you being so secretive? I don't understand.
I'm barely able to get any words out of my mouth, and you're already accusing me.
Go ahead, then summarize. Hit a couple bullet points. Mr. Ayer here is like, oh, we're not going to say anything.
R. It's pronounced R.
R. Mr. R is not going to says we're not going to say anything. So I would think you guys would want to say what happened at the meeting.
The chairman, Mr. Blair, was in charge of the entire meeting, and he reviewed for us the accomplishments of Carfax in the year 2015, and then he went through the proposed actions and activities that the committee would take in 2016, and we all listened, and some of us commented. I didn't say much of anything at all. I think Commissioner Schaefer did, and Did Commissioner Clark?
Yeah,
think?
I had a few comments, frankly. I'm trying to remember what they were. What was this, last week? I'm trying to remember what I said, to be honest.
Well, you got into the business privilege tax issue, I believe. February 17th, there are going to be small business owners before CARFAC discussing the mercantile tax and the business privilege tax and different issues therewith, such as the deduction, the auditing schedule, things of that nature. So that's February 17th at 7 p.m. Obviously, whatever happens there will come before us, but that's going to be an interesting thing to listen to. February 17th at 7.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Clark. That's a very valuable thing to convey.
Well, in the future, Commissioner Booker, if you want me to take notes, you can't come. Just tell me ahead of time.
No,
that you can't make it, and I'll take it.
Just when you review it, just highlight a couple of key elements so that the public and those who were indisposed on business, after changing the meeting date several times.
Maybe we just FaceTime through the iPads. Can we do that? We'll just bring you in remotely.
I had a meeting. I couldn't
we're all in agreement
attend.
that there were no secrets, and you now know everything that was going on?
No, I agree that there were no secrets. My point is, you should just highlight some of the key points that were talked about.
I stand corrected. I'll approve that next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
That is the end of that. And now, library. Rich, let's hear what's going on with the library.
No report.
Well, can't you be more?
No, we didn't have a meeting. We'll have a meeting later this month.
I guess there are no secrets. I'm just not sure.
If I wasn't at a meeting, I can't talk about it. If you guys were all at a meeting.
This week, is that an issue? I checked books out of the library this week. Is that something I need to report?
No.
Yeah,
as long as you don't have any.
Don.
I don't want you to have any fines, though. That's what I'm concerned about.
There would be taxes, not fines. All right, I am at public health now.
No report.
John Nagel. Is there old business in the audience? Young people with old business, no? All right. Is there young people with new business?
I move that we adjourn.
Wait a minute, excuse me. Public participation.
Okay, come forward, please.
Sorry, Jane Galley, Barclayton Road, Rosemont. I thought of this after the fact. I'm sorry, I should have brought it up while you're talking about the Willis. But since they're doing assessment and stuff, just a question whether, A, the building has asbestos in it, B, whether it's got knob and tube electrical work, if it has lead paint, lead pipes, or bad sewers, because we have to have sewers in there. The $1.5 million to $2 million will be eaten up very quickly. So I think that should be all part and parcel of how you make a decision on what should happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
It is to my understanding, no, yes, no, yes, no.
I'm impressed.
Wait, all right, wait, I can't remember.
And I remember when I was on Parks and Rec Board, Jane, that we did abatement at both Kreuzberg and the Willows.
Okay.
Because it was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. That's why I was asking whether that was part of the knowledge of what's.
Did we do the abatement, John?
Huh?
Did we actually do the
Yeah,
abatement?
yeah. I mean, at the Kreuzberg, literally scraping all the paint off and sandblasting. Well, I guess you used walnut shells or something.
Yeah.
The point is, 1.5 million will be gone before anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're finished. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Rich, you okay? Okay.